Good evening and welcome to the August 3rd, 2020 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Councilmember Spiegel to lead us in the pledge this evening.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ryan. Next on our agenda is reflection. I'd like to call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Next on our agenda is public comments. And before I have Brian, our tech team, play the little instructional video about raising your hand and our format for volunteering to give a comment, I wanted to note that we have, this is, if you're here to speak about the Duval crematorium concept site plan proposal tonight, that public hearing is next. This is the time where the Mayor and Council like to hear about any topic other than that, and we ask that you state your name and address or neighborhood for the record. And tech team, if you could play the instructional video, that would be great.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, I see a few raised hands for public comments. The first one is Robert Portanova. Tech team, if you could bring up Robert. And Robert, once you get on, unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood for the record, and go ahead with your testimony. Do we have Robert on the line, tech team?
Yes, he's been enabled to speak.
Robert, please go ahead with your comments. Doesn't look like he's muted either. Okay, well then we will go on to the next testimony. I see Robert Duvall. If tech team could bring up Robert Duvall. And if you would just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood for the record, and begin your testimony.
I'm Robert Duvall, 10 East Deer Park Drive, Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'm the owner, operator of Duvall Funeral Home, along with my brother, Kevin Duvall. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting us have this meeting. We are wanting to add some rooms. We have a house next door that we're trying to add some service/visitation rooms.
Robert, tech team, if you can just pause this. Robert, your public hearing is coming up next. This is
no, I didn't want to say anything other than that. I mean, I just wanted to introduce myself.
Yes, but what you're speaking about is related to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to introduce myself.
Yeah, so I'd like to wait. We're gonna come back to you. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. Tech team, if you could bring up Patrick Casey, please, that would be great. And Patrick, once you're up here, just unmute yourself, state your name, address or neighborhood, begin your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to.
Everybody.
We're gonna come back.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Tech team, if you could bring up Patrick Casey, please. Great. And Patrick, once you're
Patrick, I think you might have either YouTube or Comcast open. You have to be just on the Zoom call to be able to be seen and heard.
Okay, let's come back.
I don't
Let's
know
come back to Patrick.
what the trouble.
Let's try Carol Johnson. Tech team, if you can bring up Carol, and Carol, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. This is Carol Johnson. I'm on Gaither Street, and I just have a simple question. Can the tech team provide closed captioning for these meetings? This is the first time I've joined a virtual meeting. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see if we can get you an answer on that. Next, I see Kenneth Bauer. Tech team, if you can bring up Kenneth. And Kenneth, once you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Kenneth Bauer. I'm in the Glen Hills neighborhood of Montgomery County. I'm the president-elect of the West Montgomery County Citizens Association, and I'm also vice president of the Watts Branch Watershed Alliance, although these views are my own. I just visited the beautiful area, which is the site of the Watkins Mill Road and Travis Avenue stream restoration project a few days ago for the first time. My humble opinion, it would be a crime against nature if this relatively natural area is converted into an engineered drainage ditch. In reality, this proposed stream restoration would be better called stream destruction. It will remove scores of trees, thus destroying the aquatic invertebrates and other stream aquatic wildlife that rely on cool, shaded conditions for survival, as well as understory shrubs and herbaceous plants, compact the soil, thus destroying the original soil structure and hydrology, change the physical characteristics of the site with respect to geological formations and rock type, and kill reptiles, amphibians, and other critters that cannot escape. The problem of stormwater from impervious surface runoff in overdeveloped areas is more properly and ethically solved by upland, and by that I mean out of the stream valley, stormwater management products in already disturbed areas. The overall negative environmental impacts of this stream engineering project will far outweigh any benefits to sediment and nutrient reduction in the Chesapeake Bay. I hope you understand the environmental destruction that these so-called stream restorations inflict on our few remaining natural properties, and I would respectfully ask you to stop projects like this and others in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Lisa Schuler. And Lisa, when you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and begin your testimony. Looks like Lisa might be muted.
Now, hello.
Hello, we can hear you. Go right
Oh,
ahead.
good. Okay. I'm sorry. I want to follow the rules here. Did you say this evening is not to talk about the crematorium, or it is to?
This evening is, we do have that public hearing, but it's not, this agenda item is for public comments other than
Ah,
that
okay.
topic.
When shall that time come up? Is it tonight or another evening?
Tonight. It will be the next agenda item.
All
We have
right
public
then.
comments, and then we're going to that public hearing.
I'll raise my hand later. Thank you.
Thank you, tech team. Let's try Robert Portanova again and see if we can get him unmuted. Robert, state your name, address, and neighborhood, and please begin your testimony. Not hearing anything. Okay, we will go to tech team. We can go to Mary Evely. And Mary, same as what you just heard, state your name, address, and neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Hello, everyone. This is Mary Evely, and I live in the Summit Hall Reserve community by Wester Park. And my comment is about Borer Park. So we frequent the park, and we noticed that the shrubberies around the pond has been removed. and there's 2 ponds in the area, and one is not just aesthetic, for aesthetic reasons, it doesn't look nice, but more importantly, it's actually where, the wildlife in there, like there's no more birds, there's no more, like, we don't know where the animals who used to live there or kind of, dependent on those shrubberies. So I guess my question is, why were they just kind of mowed down? And was there any reason, or was that more of a mistake?
Thank you for your testimony. Dennis, if you can get an answer to Mary and copy the council on that, that would be great. I'm unaware of that particular project or what decision was made, so staff can get us an update on that. Next, I'd like tech team, if you could bring up Patrick Casey. And Patrick, once you get on, unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Yes, hi, everyone. My name is Pat Casey. I live at 104 East Deer Park Drive, not too far from Duval. I'm not talking about that right this minute. I understand the rules. I assume you all can hear me now?
Yes, go right ahead, please.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I just want to make a quick note that, living on East Deer Park for 30 plus years now, I've had a great deal of experience with the speed humps on East Deer Park Road. And,
Patrick, please do. We can hear you, but it would help if you speak up a bit.
Okay, sure. Maybe I can turn this up somehow. I don't know, but I hope this is better. So again, I'm referring to the speed humps on East Deer Park Drive. And having lived here for 30 plus years, I have a little experience with them. And I just wanted to point out that they don't slow anybody down, and they make an enormous amount of noise when all the trailers and from the contractors drive by, sometimes as late as 1 and 2 and even 3 a.m. in the morning. So I was hoping, my goal is to have them removed or at least moved away from my house. I've spoken to my other neighbors, and we are all in agreement that they are a bit of a waste of time and money, and they're created a significant nuisance for our neighborhood. So I'd appreciate it if you all would take into consideration any alternatives that could be arranged in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Dennis, if you can have Tony Berger, Public Works, follow up on that and take a look at the situation with the speed humps, that would be great. Next, I'd like to call up Mary Kay Smith. And Mary Kay, once you come up, please just unmute yourself, state your name, address or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Mary Kay Smith, and I live in the Spring Meadows neighborhood of Darnestown. I'm on the board of the Muddy Branch Alliance, as well as the Seneca Creek Watershed Partners. These are 2 watershed groups that work to protect the local watersheds that include the areas in Gaithersburg. And I've sent in a letter of support regarding the objections that have been raised by both Ken Bauer, that you've heard from, and also Debbie Sarabia, who I know has sent in a letter to you, and I assume is probably going to be speaking in this meeting. So rather than repeat what they've said, I just want to say I'm completely in support of their objections to the planned project at Bloom Park Whetstone Run. And I wanted to add one thing that hasn't yet been mentioned, is that along with the destruction of habitat that will happen if this project goes forward, is the fact that disturbed soil becomes the perfect growing place for alien invasive plants. And in our area, we currently do have a very serious problem with invasive plants. And unless you're planning to put together a very significant budget that will extend out many years to monitor, pull, cut, spray the weeds that are going to grow here, that's one of the problems with doing a major soil disturbance like this, is that that in large measure, unless you're very careful and spend a lot of time and put in a lot of native plants, that there will be regrowth instead of good plants that will come in as invasive plants. So I just wanted to make that point as an additional reason not to move forward without rethinking some of the aspects of this planned project. And I also wanted to say thank you for your public service for the mayor and the city council.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, I'd like to call up Walter Umana. Walter, once you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and or address, and begin your testimony.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Walter Umana. I live off of 400 Gaither Street in the East Deer Park neighborhood, right next to City Hall. I recently purchased my home, my first home, and as a first-time home buyer, I'm learning, I guess, the benefits of what your community has to offer, what your neighborhood has to offer, and my surroundings. And shortly after purchasing my home, I learned that there was going to be a Wawa gas station project that was approved and essentially will be located right in my backyard. I've spoken to my neighbors about this. They're not happy with the idea of having a pretty much mega super souped up gas station right behind our house, with all the negative effects that comes with it. I sincerely believe that this would be a great mistake that will have a domino effect with the area as far as accidents occurring on 355, the amount of traffic that this will create within such a small section, I think will have some negative effects where children that I see that go to school jaywalk on a daily basis. I commute taking the bus, and my bus stop is right where this Wawa gas station would be. And on a regular basis, I'm seeing these young students running as fast as they can across 355, which is about 6 lanes of road. And without any care for it, I think that there may be some accidents that occur because of that. I also think that since there will be a lot of congestion with traffic, now people will seek alternatives and they'll be using our neighborhood to get from point A to point B as fast as they can. The roads in the neighborhood are narrow enough and people are walking their dogs and walking their children on a regular basis. I really feel that this could pose some danger to it. Aside from any nature negative effects, the fumes from the gas, I think will have a negative impact on it. And I just think it's not the proper place to put it. I've seen Wawas many times on the countryside where there aren't people living. And I think that this is going to be allowed, it would be a huge mistake. And I think that I'm one of many voices that are against this project. And I didn't get a chance to initially address this when the project was going through approval and the hearing and all, but this is just one voice I wanted to make out there. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll make a last call for any other testimonies, and just note that we did go through a process for Wawa approval process nearly a year ago, and it did pass. And I'm not sure what stage the planning is in the project, when construction will start, but that's already been through before this body. And same with the Bloom Park stormwater project that was voted on last month. The contract has been awarded and plans are moving forward. Of course, anybody's welcome to testify to whatever they like, but I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. Next, I want to call on Shanika Whitehurst. Tech team, if you could bring Shanika up, and Shanika, just state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Hi, my name is Shanika Whitehurst. I live in the East Deer Park community. I just had a question regarding parking at residences. Is there any ordinances or such that I guess govern if you can park a car, like for instance, in your yard versus in the driveway? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Is that all you have? Is that
Yes.
just that one question? Okay. We can get you an answer on that. There are ordinances that that dictate parking. I couldn't quote them from memory at the moment, but we can connect you with Kevin Roman from our Neighborhood Services Division, and he can get you all of those official answers on that. I see two hands that are still up. Robert Portnovo, we've tried twice and it hasn't worked out. And Mary Evely already testified, so we're going to move on. Unless we have, okay, I see Debbie Sarabia. Tech team, if you could bring up Debbie, that'd be great. Debbie, once you unmute yourself, just state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin your testimony. Deborah? Are you with us, Deborah? I heard something, but I'm not.
Sister, maybe.
Deborah?
Is that help?
No.
No?
Deborah, are you with us?
No, try again.
No? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, that's great. Okay. This is Debbie Sarabia. I live in the Saybrook neighborhood. As we all know, Gaithersburg is a highly urbanized city with very little open land available. We're being told that in order to meet our requirements under the Clean Water Act, that we have to create new stormwater facilities by flooding and deforesting what little open space we have left. It strikes me, should strike you as ironic that we are destroying nature in order to protect it. Meanwhile, the city approves new developments with acres and acres of new impervious surfaces. Kelly Park, Frederick Road, Deer Park Drive, Watkins Mill, Crown Spectrum, Watkins Mill Interchange, we can go on and on. At this pace, even though we have 100% retention at new developments, we're still behind the stormwater curve. I think the city needs to start reducing and removing pavement. That's the only sustainable path forward. And also note, by the way, at Bloom Park, there are 106 trees to be removed. These are the trees with a greater than 12-inch DBH diameter. An uncounted number of smaller trees are to be removed. These are not included in the total. Thanks so much for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. And I see another hand up, Tamara Weber. If tech team could bring up Tamara and just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Tammy Weber, 103 Hutton. Is this clear?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to comment a couple of comments that were said earlier. We do have a big parking problem in the Easter Park neighborhood area. I live over on Hutton, and all sorts of things. It just needs to be looked at again. I know many years ago they looked at things because I'm constantly getting my driveway blocked. People park behind my driveway. The problem is where I'm at on Hutton, it's not wide enough. So really they should take 3 feet off the non-telephone pole of the driveways of everybody over there to make it standard. And then people could park all over the place and you could get out of your driveways. And we have people that have 3 unworkable cars parked in the driveway. So they and all their family members all park on the road. I don't know if that's allowed. We have businesses. The guy was complaining about the speed bumps and the noises. We have landscaping businesses. The people rent the houses. They have dump trucks. They have trailers. They're backing in. They're blocking. All kinds of things going on. And it just needs to be looked at on a higher level. And then the thing with the Wawa too, and a general comment is we often don't get enough, and even with the developing coming up, we don't get enough notice to be able to look into these things, to be able to comment, in timely fashion. I tried to look at the 250-page document for tonight, and I haven't had time to do it because I just found out about it Friday. But the Wawa thing, I thought the state was looking at high schools and where there was businesses by schools and accidents and trying to reduce things like that. So it hasn't gone in yet. So I would suggest that people look into that too. I think it was either the state or the county that was looking into things like that to try to reduce injuries by businesses being close to schools and stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Didn't I see Patrick Casey's hand is up? Didn't we call on Patrick before? Tech team?
I can't confirm, sir. Sorry.
Okay, let's bring up Patrick.
Yes, hi, Judd and council members. Yeah, it's me again. I just wanted to piggyback on Mayor's comments regarding the short time to review the development process. I believe I read it was only 14 days. And as she noted, that's not nearly enough time to read and understand all the ramifications and implications, and even just get a general concept or get anything more than a general concept as to what these new development projects entail. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents to her concerns, that I think it would behoove the community and the council and you, Judd, to maybe take another look. And we, as your constituents, would greatly appreciate having a little more time to understand these very complex issues. So thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you. Since we inadvertently gave Patrick a second crack at it, let me do it for Mary, and then we'll call Monica after that. So Mary Evely, please, very quickly, we've heard from you before. Generally, we don't allow a second testimony, but we just accidentally did it with Patrick. So I'm going to give you a chance. Please make it quick.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much. You guys can hear me? Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right. Okay. So I'm sorry. This is my first time, so I forgot one thing that is really important. So, on 355, I live right on Wester Park. A lot of cars going northbound, and it's a downhill. Sometimes when the light is red right there, right after you pass Gaithersburg High School, people will turn right into my neighborhood. There's townhomes, it's right next to Borough Park, and they speed down, and I walk down with my 2-year-old, and it's a constant problem. So is there a possibility for the city to review a speed bump or a sign of sort where, children, like live here or something like that, because they always go down. They don't even live in my neighborhood. They just pass down, go around, and then go back down to Wester Park.
Thank you, Mary. I think we understand the question. If you could send me an email, judd.ashman@gaithersburgmd.gov, I will have staff follow up either to look at the different options we can do with Public Works or with our police department to do some more enforcement in that area. So send me an email, judd.ashman@gaithersburgmd.gov. Next, we have Monica Lozada, tech team. And Monica, once you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Good evening. This is Monica Lozada, and I live in Gaithersburg.
I think we lost.
Mayor Ashman, I accidentally promoted her to panelist. I apologize. I'll bring her back just as soon as I can.
Okay, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, did you hear anything I said earlier or no?
No, we really didn't. Go ahead and start over, please. We're sorry about that.
This is Monica Lozada, and I live in Gage Street in Easter Park neighborhood. And I hear some concerns of people when it comes to the new constructions and the storm water management issues and things of that nature. And I was curious if the city has ever thought of making some kind of incentive for either residents or commercial properties that are coming on board for construction to do permeable parking lots and permeable driveways. I know when I was stationed overseas, I saw that a lot in shopping centers and throughout. And it's great for storm management. So I don't know if you guys ever considered such a thing.
I didn't catch what she did. Maybe she meant permeable?
Permeable surfaces, yes.
Okay. Yes, we've certainly looked at that, and it's been used in some places, but it's been challenging in others because it's a hard material to maintain in general. But if you'd like to find out more, I can get you more answers. Just send me a note at judd.ashman@gaithersburgmd.gov, and I'll have staff follow up with you on more specifics. I don't see any more raised hands, so we're going to end public comments here. We have a very quick ordinances, resolutions, and regulations. I'm going to have Lynn lead us through this. It's just adopting rules of order, which we do anyway, but just to codify it.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman. The resolution before you this evening is to codify some rules of procedure. These basically just put into writing many of the practices of the mayor and council, and they were patterned after similar rules of procedure that are currently used by a number of the city's quasi-judicial committees and boards, such as the Planning Commission, the Animal Control Board, the Personnel Review Board. We did also, staff did also look at rules of procedures from other jurisdictions and included some of those provisions. Basically addresses the conduct of meetings, the order of presentation, what the rules for speakers are, and also the rules for cross-examination. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Someone want to move is this a resolution?
Yes.
Yeah, someone want to move the resolution? Go ahead, Neil.
I move the resolution of the mayor and city council adopting rules of procedure for testimony and evidence at mayor and city council public hearings.
Mike.
I'll second the resolution, the
Yeah, I'm going to
motion.
call the roll. All in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay, thank you guys very much. Thank you, Lynn. We're going to move on. Tech team, if you could bring up Jasmine Forbes and anybody associated with the Duval concept site plan to present. Tonight, this is a public hearing, so we're going to hear from the applicant. There will be questions and comments from the mayor and council, and then we're going to go and hear from anybody in the public who'd like to testify on this. So Jasmine, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. This is a public hearing on concept site plan SP-8415-2020. This application comes before the council as a public hearing in accordance with section 24-160G-C1 of the city code. The subject properties are located at 10 and 14 East Deer Park Drive and is zone CD corridor development. The applicant's requesting concept site plan approval to expand the services for the Duval Funeral Home by converting an existing single-family house at 14 East Deer Park Drive to a funeral home, which includes viewing parlors and associated crematorium. The plan also includes expansion of the existing parking lot and other minor site improvements. The hearing was duly advertised on the July 16th and July 23rd in the Washington Post and published on the city's website on July 14th. So at the present time, there are 26 exhibits in the record files. They are referenced in an exhibit list in the files. The individual exhibits may be reviewed on the city website and at City Hall during regular office hours. After the meeting packet was posted, staff has received additional correspondence for this application. The correspondence will be part of the council's record for consideration. Any objections to the receipt of any exhibit should be noted prior to the closing of the record. Otherwise, they'll be deemed received in evidence. And can I please have packet number 21, please? And I will have Scott Wallace, who's the attorney for the applicant from Miles and Stockbridge, to start the presentation this evening.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Wallace. I'm with Miles and Stockbridge here on behalf of Duval Funeral Home. And I will be going through the presentation. What I'll be doing is describing the project and the concept plan. Also speaking tonight on behalf of the applicant is Bob Duvall. His family is the owner and operator of the Duvall Funeral Home. And Bob will speak about the reason for the expansion of the funeral home and how he will operate the addition. And then Jeffrey Barron is with Matthews Environmental Solutions. Mr. Barron will speak about the operation of the equipment and answer any questions about its safety. Phil Rhodes is also available. We don't have anything for Phil to present at this time, but he's with AMT and they're the project civil engineer. And if any questions come up about site design, Phil can help with those. So with that, if you could go to the first slide, please. Thank you. So this orients you to the site and the project. The Duvall Funeral Home obviously is located, the existing Duvall Funeral Home is located on 355 at the corner of 355 at East Deer Park Lane. It's shown there as 10 East Park Drive. Moving back from there to the east on East Deer Park is the existing service parking lot that serves the funeral home. The funeral home has been in this location since the late 1980s. Then moving further east down, you can see 14 East Deer Park Drive shown here. That's the site of the proposed conversion of the existing house on the site to a funeral home use. Right now, that's a separate parcel, but it is owned by the Duvall Funeral Home. And that's the site of the concept plan application proposal. In addition to the conversion of the house to a funeral home use, there'll be surface parking added to the site, to the rear there in the back yard. And then just a couple other uses in the area across the street from East Deer Park from the house proposed conversion. Those are professional offices. Moving to the west towards 355 in East Deer Park, those are multifamily buildings directly across from the existing funeral home. And then further to the east along East Deer Park are single family houses, and there's a few additional professional offices operating out of at least a couple of those houses. If you go to the next slide, please. The concept plan proposes basically two phases. In the first phase, it's the conversion of the existing house on the property to a funeral home use. That will include an addition of approximately 600 square feet. The house will be used as a viewing parlor, and there will be cremation equipment installed in the 600-foot addition. The viewing parlor will be used for families who wish to view a cremation or to have their services in the same location as the cremation equipment, and in particular serving certain faith communities where this is the practice for their faith to initiate the cremation process and to view it. The addition will be approximately 1 story in height, and again, it generally intended to serve existing clients of the funeral home, not expected to generate a significant number of new families using the services, again, except again for certain faith communities and certain families who wish to be part of the cremation process. The second phase would be the increase of the surface parking on the property from 89 spaces to 111 spaces. And this is to accommodate the occasions when there's a large funeral and or there's multiple funerals going on at the same time. What we have found, and Bob will talk a little bit more about this when he speaks, what we have found in the current situation with COVID and expected to maybe go on for the foreseeable future is, given the limitations on the number of people that can be at any particular funeral, and there's a desire to have multiple funerals in these spaces. So this would allow for additional parking to be provided, and it would help with the occasions when there is overflow from, again, large funerals or multiple funerals going on at the same time. There occasionally can be overflow parking on adjacent streets, so this would help alleviate that. If you can go to the next slide, please. This is a rendered of the concept plan. Basically gives you a sense of how the campus, the funeral home will function and relate with the opening up of the house for funeral services and the addition of the parking. Essentially, it will now act as more of a unified site than it currently does. Existing fence will come down that separates the two parcels. Importantly, there won't be any new curb cuts along East Deer Park. The existing driveways that serve the existing funeral home use will be maintained, and the driveway that serves the existing house will be maintained with no changes to that, to the pattern. If you could go to the next slide, please. Give you a sense of, this is conceptual architecture for the site. What we've done and what the project proposes is to maintain the residential appearance of the house. You can see the elevations on the bottom. That's the elevation along East Deer Park. That'll be remain in its current form in terms of windows, door locations. For the most part, at least, there's no intentions right now to change them. But the windows will be maintained. The garage door will be maintained. As I said, the driveway will be maintained. And then moving around to the back where the addition will be, you can see it's meant to use the same materials of a residential appearance as the rest of the house. Similar roof design with a typical residential roof design, and trying to maintain a height of a very similar to the existing roof line. We think that's, again, about 1 story. The exact height has not been determined yet, but it's meant to be, again, very similar in massing to the existing house. You can see, again, the residential appearance of the house will be maintained on all sides. Next slide, please. Just to provide you some sense of, again, how the two parts of the funeral house home will relate. This is just an existing photo of the frontage of the existing funeral home on East Deer Park Drive. Obviously, that'll be maintained. It's not being changed in this application. If you can move to the next slide, please. There you can see how the two houses relate to each other along East Deer Park. And again, this will be maintained with this appearance of the existing the house when it's converted to the funeral home use. Will be maintaining that facade along East Deer Park in that driveway location. And you can see how it relates to the existing funeral home from this picture along East Deer Park. Next slide, please. And again, to give you a sense of the house and its appearance along East Deer Park. You can go to the next slide, please. This is just to show you now how the two properties are kind of separated, even though they're under common ownership and have been for 20 years or so. This existing fence would come down, and again, the site would operate as one in terms of parking, access, etc. And it allows it to be more of a unified property and use. The next slide, please. And here, this is a picture of the rear yard from the side of the property facing Bean Court. You can see looking out onto it, this is where the existing, where the proposed surface parking facilities would be added. And this would be where the 600 square foot addition would be added as well. And again, that fence would be coming down as part of the project if approved to unify the site. I think that's my last slide. Yes, thank you. Turn it over now to Bob Duvall. He'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the addition and the conversion of the house to a funeral home use and the operation of it. So with that, unless you have questions for me, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, Bob. Bob, you're currently muted.
How's that?
There you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Where do I start? So I've been in Gaithersburg since 1990. I own and run the business with my brother. I'm third generation. In the last 30 years, our industry has changed quite a bit. The increase in cremation has, since I've been there, more than doubled. When I first started, our cremation rate was roughly 15%, and we're pushing closer to 50%. The services we provide, families have visiting and services and then cremation, or do direct cremation. Currently, we're using a facility in Alexandria, Virginia. We've been using them basically my whole life. And they do a wonderful job, but we're finding more and more of our families are wanting to be a part of the cremation, kind of from start to end. You know, they like the fact that some funeral homes can offer from A to Z, they're taking care of their loved one. And we feel that it would be something very good for our families that we can provide to them. We're dealing with many different cultures in Gaithersburg. We have many families from Gaithersburg that are not doing cremations in our community because they want to be a part of it. To go to Alexandria, Virginia, we're very limited on the hours that we can do that. And it takes us about an hour with DC traffic to get down there. So we are finding many families are leaving our area and going to other counties where a funeral home has their crematory, and they can do everything there. There's some cultures that want to start the cremation process. They want to have their services right there and not go anywhere else once the cremation takes place. And by doing this conversion, we also can increase some of the space we have to allow our families to have visiting and services that we can't necessarily do when the rooms are full down at the funeral home or down at 10 East Deer Park. I don't necessarily anticipate that this will increase our business. It may, but I think it's more, we would be able to provide more services to the families we currently serve. Some people have no problem with us using a third-party crematory, but we're finding more and more people don't like that fact. So that's kind of why we're looking at this option. Thank you.
Okay, so unless there's questions for Bob at this time, I turn it over to Jeffrey Barron. And Jeffrey can walk through what the equipment is that would be used for the cremation process and talk a little bit about the safety issues that have come up and been discussed. So with that, Jeffrey.
Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Council, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate you guys having me here today. My name is Jeffrey Barron. I work for Matthews Environmental Solutions. We have been manufacturing cremation equipment since 1946 and are by far the world leader in the industry with over 5,000 installations throughout the globe. Every unit that's manufactured by Matthews is UL listed. That's Underwriters Laboratory. And that's to ensure both operator safety, facility safety, environmental safety. Every unit we have has a built-in pollution monitoring system that will automatically supervise things through a method of anticipation. Each unit that we have has been tested by independent labs with standards set forth by the federal government's Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. The cremation equipment that's being proposed has previously been reviewed and performs in this state. We've got over 67 units, I think, in Maryland, one of the most stringent environmental regulatory agencies with the DEP. Upon startup, every installation, the cremator operators are fully trained in maintenance as well as in operation. Our equipment operates with no emissions, or no visible emissions, I should say, and no odor. Over 70% of the cremation equipment that's installed today has done so in residential communities or light commercial areas because they're there to serve the community, and that's where these funeral homes usually are. Right? It's been our experience at Matthews that most communities treat the installation of a crematory and a funeral home as an accessory use. City planners and zoning officers realize that cremation is simply preparation of the body for memorialization. That's the funeral home's job. So again, this is an accessory to the funeral home that's there to enhance their service to the community. The unit that's being proposed meets nationally recognized building, electrical, fire, and safety codes. Additionally, it's in compliance with the state of Maryland. I'm here to answer any technical questions you might have about how the equipment works. So if you have any questions, I'm available.
And what we've done, thank you, Jeffrey, what we've done is kept our presentation fairly succinct and brief. We realized there's questions and we thought it was best to take time to be able to answer those questions. And that's what we're certainly able to do now. One thing to, which again, we were happy to talk more about as an answer, subsequent, there's actually two other regulatory programs that are involved in the operation of crematory in the state of Maryland. One is, as I think Jeffrey mentioned, is the licensing of the operator themselves, who has to go through and this will be Bob in this case, Bob Duvall, through the state board that will go through a classes for training the operator, and that operator will then get a license. And then the second, very stringent, very rigorous review process is the actual permitting of the facility by the state MDE before it can operate. So we can again talk about those in more detail, but wanted to make the point that in addition to going through the typical local zoning process, which we're in now, there's two other regulatory hurdles that have to be passed before the operation can begin. And again, happy to answer more questions about those processes, but with that, I think, again, like to ask if there's particular questions that we can answer now. We're happy to do so.
Right. Thank you guys for the presentation. I'm sure we have questions, and I know we have a lot of testimony. So we'll go through us, Mayor and Council, questions and comments, and then we'll go to the public. And I'll start with just asking you guys to talk about the impact on the neighborhood. Obviously, you know, having a crematory somewhere is not a new thing for the world, but in terms of the city of Gaithersburg, it's certainly new to have it nearby residences. So talk about that.
Well, I think one consideration is there is no impact in the sense of there is no smoke and there are no odors associated with it. In many ways, because of the technology involved, and this is high-tech equipment, it functions so efficiently to eliminate smoke and odor. It operates in many ways more efficiently and more safely than a fireplace would, for example, in terms of what comes out of the stack, the chimney. There will be exhaust through a chimney. It'll have a residential appearance in the sense that it'll be a brick chimney, so it'll look like a normal chimney. So our view is that the operation itself has no impact on the neighbors in terms of safety, in terms of what's being emitted, in terms of noise. It operates about as loudly when it's on as a residential air conditioning unit does. And if you look at where it's located, it is not where the addition would be located. You don't really have any direct neighbors that are really adjacent to it. So you have separation that way. I'd point out that Pumphrey's funeral home which some of you may be familiar with, is located on Wisconsin Avenue in Bethesda, downtown Bethesda, and really Main and Main. It's Bethesda, Wisconsin, and Old Georgetown Road. It's located, I visited the site yesterday. It's located, the back of the building, of Pumphrey's building, is maybe 10 or 15 feet from Garden Apartments. Pumphrey's has been operating, Bob believes it's been operating at least for the 30 or so years you've been in the area, Bob.
Yes.
And nobody really knows that unless they've used those crematorium services. And in addition, it's about 150 feet or so from a playground that's attached to the private school, a small private school, a church school that's located there in Bethesda as well. And it's actually probably closer to the playing fields for the Bethesda Chevy Chase High School than this site is relative to the high school across 355. So you have these uses in the county that are cheek and jowl with residential uses, with office uses, with schools, with playgrounds, et cetera. And they're part of the community like any other part that doesn't have noxious elements to it that make it undesirable or affect property values.
Does the Pumphrey's facility use the same equipment we're talking about for this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming in addition to Pumphrey's, there are other instances in which this particular equipment has been put into use nearby residential in other parts of the state. And assuming so, are there any instances of complaints or problems with it? I guess this question's for Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you're muted.
So when you say complaints or problems, what do you have? I mean, what?
From residents about noticing any or having any sort of atmospheric impact of this equipment.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yeah, like I said, over 70% of this equipment, it goes into funeral homes that are located in residential areas or very light commercial districts. Most people don't even know it's there.
So the answer is no, there hasn't been. You're not aware of particular complaints. Okay.
Yeah.
Council members, raise your hand if you'd like to ask. Okay, we'll go with Neil Harris. And then Rob after that.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, folks, for the presentation. It was very informative. I know we received a large number of emails from surrounding residents with concern, and I think you've addressed many of those issues. One email in particular made the case that there is a crematorium in the heart of Frederick City, and that there's a noticeable odor in the neighborhood from that. It's not well, I don't have much of a sense of smell, so it's not, I wasn't going to go try to see if I could sniff it out, but what is your feeling on this? I mean, you've stated that there's no odors. Somebody said that they believe there are. What would anybody expect realistically?
I think Jeffrey, you want to?
Yeah, so as the machine is designed, when it's maintained and operating correctly, the products of combustion that are created from a cremation cycle through that unit in such a way that everything is recombusted and retumbled and recombusted, so that by the time that they are emitted from the stack, they are odorless and colorless.
So you've also spoken about the various agencies that are required to license a new facility. Are there agencies that are required to inspect a facility to make sure that it's operating within the stated parameters?
Yeah, yes, there are. The MDE will do inspections. They do them. From what I've been able to research, they do them more than once a year. They also respond to complaints. If there is an odor, for example, being perceived, they would respond to that. So the state does inspect on a regular basis and has, again, from what I've been able to review records-wise, a fairly rigorous inspection program. There's two monitoring systems should be understood as well. You have the monitoring going on while the equipment is running. That's by the operator. That's by Bob again, or Bob's intended to be the operator. If there's another one who's licensed, then that person monitoring as well. And then Jeffrey's company offers and actually provides monitoring services as well remotely. And so if a sensor picks up something that's not operating the way it's supposed to be in terms of maintaining heat levels or anything like that, then Jeffrey is alerted, and if it already has been picked up by Bob and his monitoring, then there's another alert. So you have inspections by the state on how things are operating. You have the state that responds to complaints if there's a complaint, and then you have the monitoring going on between manufacturer and obviously the on-site operator as well.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is obviously the city is not equipped to do any those sorts of inspections. If there was a complaint that came to us, we would have to know who to pass that along to at the state level. So one last question for Jeffrey is that you mentioned, and I think you were very, very careful to be specific, that there is no smoke and there's no visible emission. But what about, I mean, as we've seen with global warming, carbon dioxide is not visible and it is problematic. What gaseous or other invisible or even microscopic particulate emissions would we expect to come from a crematorium?
Well, you would expect various particulate matter, some nitrogen oxides, some volatile organic compounds. But I can tell you that the biggest culprits of all three of those respectively would be a fireplace, a diesel truck, or a hamburger joint, like a popular fast food type hamburger joint. In fact, that puts out probably close to 8 times the amount of volatile organic compounds than a crematory does.
Over what time period? Is that per day or per?
That would be per day, per hour, per minute. I mean, you know, as it's running, equal amount of time. Sure.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Councilmember Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Just a few follow-up questions on what Neil was just asking about. Can you provide the technical data for the equipment that's going to be used? As far as combustion levels, you had mentioned it was recirculating combustion. Do you use scrubbers, for example? Do you test for emissions? Is there any emission tester? You mentioned some kind of warning system. What is it warning for? Is it warning for equipment malfunction, or is it actually testing for emission levels? If so, what's it being tested for? And then do you have anything as far as where you have tested emissions from the equipment to figure out what is in fact being emitted?
Okay, so I guess I'll start with the opacity monitor, which is what was referred to earlier. Okay, and so what that is that is a system where you have a light shining through the stack, through the base of the stack, to a transmitter. Okay, and it is set below state standards, which is usually most states between 10 and 20% of how much light can pass through that beam. Right. So if the particulate matter is too thick, that's what smoke is, too much particulate matter. So if blocking that light to a certain level, then you're going to have a visible alarm, which is going to be a big red light. You're going to have a very loud audio alarm, and the machine automatically takes corrective action. And that is by adjusting the burners and the airflow in different parts of the unit so that it recombusts all that particulate matter until it clears up. Once those emissions have cleared up, which usually in most cases in that type of an event happens, it's within minutes. And remember, particularly in Maryland, any sort of event like this is, when there's an event reported, it's all public record. So that's how the opacity monitor works. You also have, as was stated before, with this particular unit, our control system, which is the Empire control system, which is monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and also allows for the people monitoring to go in and make manual changes in the event that they need to go ahead and take corrective action before that, because they can get alarms sent to them too if it's, you know, for various reasons, such as, you know, opacity emissions. Okay, so that does that answer that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're measuring the size of the particulate, not necessarily the type of particulate.
So the type of particulate with the state of Maryland is when we apply for the environmental permitting, which is a standard, you know, method of what we do. You have to get in the MDE has to review. Within a period, and that could are submitted to say along with the application to the state.
Jeffrey, you're currently breaking up. You may want to stop your video to see if we can hear your audio better, sir.
Yeah, Jeff, if you could just repeat that. Sorry.
How's that? Is that a little better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the as far as the contents of the emissions, I think that's what I was talking about. So when applying to the state of Maryland, they have to include in the application, which we help with them prepare, a stack test. And that is where they have gone in and done a test that's valid, that's within a 5-year period, was performed within a 5-year period to give the contents of the emissions. The technical data that we have on the machines is absolutely available, and I can send that to you. It will give you pretty much every technical aspect of the unit that you'd want to know.
Okay, thank you. And so, you know, obviously you get where I'm going here. My concern is the environmental impacts on the neighborhood, among other things. But, you know, please forgive my ignorance with the preparation and ultimate disposition of our deceased. But, you know, when you have a fireplace, typically you're burning wood. I would hope you're burning wood or paper and things like that. Whereas, you know, at least in the human form, I can point to the back of my teeth to get the amalgam there. And I think I actually might have some mercury fillings as well. There are also parts of the body that have, if you have a prosthetic, there's plastics that which if burns could put aromatic hydrocarbons into the atmosphere. You burn rare earth metals, it could also be vaporized and cause harm. Are those mitigated at all in this process, or would the residents or should the residents be concerned that if there is cremation being performed on the bodies, that there are foreign substances that could be, you know, not necessarily particulates heavy enough and to be noticed through this light emission testing, but could be vaporized and could be environmentally impactful?
Just before Jeffrey answers that question in more depth than I can, to let you know, the permitting process with MDE uses EPA standards for basically any type of chemical or material that could be released from the cremation process. Anything that has an EPA standard that could be released in the air has to be, the permitting process uses a modeling system for the type of equipment, and the equipment has to come below any type of EPA standard for amount of that toxin that can be released that is dangerous to human beings. So the permitting process as a starting point models and has standards based on the EPA for basically any type of chemical that could come out and be released from the cremation process. So from a permitting point of view, that's what the MDE will review. And by the way, it is a public process. It's a public hearing, and every question that's being asked by you and by the comments I've seen from the public have been asked at those MDE hearings as well and are answered well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeffrey.
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, when this subject comes up, I mean, I think the real big question is always going to be mercury and fillings. Okay. So what we can say about that is the EPA describes mercury as a naturally occurring element that can be found throughout the environment. The most in-depth study of cremation released mercury showed a crematory that operated for 40 years and did about 112,000 cremations. The land tested around that crematory was found to be 10 times below the maximum level for food-producing soil and 200 times below the maximum level allowed for children's playgrounds. It's mercury is a hotbed subject, but the truth is silver amalgam fillings, although you may have them now, are becoming more rare and more rare. In fact, the American Dental Association published in, I believe it was February of 2009, that from 1990 until then, the percentage of silver amalgam fillings went from 68% to 30%. And since then, it's even less. And it's not because people were concerned so much about the environment. It's because they now make ceramic fillings that look like your teeth. So probably by, I think the estimates by Cana are somewhere in 2020, you're likely not going to be seeing silver amalgam fillings much at all. They're just not used. So it's something that I think, as far as a concern goes, I can understand anybody would be concerned if they thought that heavy metals were being, released into the environment in a dangerous level. But these levels are so low that even the US EPA is not concerned with it with regards to cremation at all.
And mercury is one of the materials tested in the MDE permitting process, and so the emission has to be below standards set for safety for humans and based on EPA standards.
Okay, thank you. And if documents on the topics I asked about could be included in the record, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Who has questions? So Ryan's hand, then Mike, then Lorianne. Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to the applicants and really everyone who's following this hearing. I think we can all understand that the word crematory or crematorium can conjure up a number of images for people based on all sorts of things. So it's important for us to have this hearing to dispel inaccuracies, but also understand both the challenges and the benefits. I wanted to ask you, and this may be a question for Robert in his experience, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the information that you conveyed in the initial presentation about faith communities and more diverse communities making use of a service like this. Maybe you can expand upon that a little bit, Robert. It's my understanding that a number of Hindu faith communities, Buddhist faith communities, and others actually have rituals that require them to either witness or initiate a cremation process. I think you alluded to that earlier, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about sort of the extent of the interest or the need in our community.
Well, the families we help, some of them do want to go to the crematory. The crematory that we use, first off, their religion requires, or they have a ceremony right before the cremation takes place. Whether it's Hindu, Buddhist, there's some other religions that they want to be there. And for us, not having the facility, we go to Alexandria, Virginia, and first off, they charge additional fees for us coming there. They limit the number of people because they have very limited parking, very limited space. And so if we had a family that, say, is at the funeral home and there's 15, 20 people, we can only take 3 cars and a maximum of 5 people. So they're limited as to how many family members can participate and be a part of this, which is very difficult for them as it's part of their faith. They're restricted on time, Monday through Friday. It has to be done before 11 o'clock. So it's difficult for us to have a service at the funeral home early in the morning, drive an hour to Alexandria, Virginia, and meet their time requirements. On the weekends, it's even more stringent. It's, I think it's by 10 o'clock on Saturdays and Sundays. So it's, we find a lot of times that we will deal with family one time and they go through this experience. And I've had, about 2 weeks ago, I had a family say, never again will we do this. That it was, basically they're saying they couldn't use this because there were so many outside forces that were restricting them. It was very difficult for them as a family to have their services. Is that what you're looking for or asking me about?
That's helpful. Thank you. My colleagues have already asked a number of the questions I was intending to ask about state or federal regulatory requirements, including follow-up inspections. So I'll move on from those. But one of the things that we haven't talked much about is the potential for other types of environmental impact like noise. I don't know if this is who this is a question for, but maybe someone could talk to us a little bit about what, if any, noise impacts there might be from these operations. And then I have some follow-ups as well.
I'll let Jeffrey get into that, but it's been described as this noise equivalent of an air conditioning unit that would serve a residential house. But I'll let Jeffrey, elaborate on that if there's anything else to add.
Well, there's not much. I mean, really, that's a very good representation of the sound that the crematorium makes. It's about just like the sound of the air conditioner unit, the heat pump outside somebody's house for the air.
Okay.
And can I just add as well that this is not a unit that would be running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I don't know if that has any merit to this.
Right. Obviously, the only noise would be emitted when the unit was in operation, and it simply doesn't run, with that frequency. And Bob and we of course have to follow any noise regulations applicable. But the operation itself just doesn't generate any significant noise.
Okay. Scott, you mentioned the Pumphrey Funeral Home in downtown Bethesda. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about that because I lived for a few years in downtown Bethesda before I moved to Gaithersburg, and I lived maybe 300 or so feet away from that funeral home in downtown Bethesda, and there was a large residential neighborhood right behind it, as I think you mentioned, and I lived in an apartment building. I never smelled or heard or felt any environmental impacts. Walked past that building many times on my way to the metro station to go to work and just to walk around. And I never felt any such impacts in my residence either. I didn't catch whether you said that they were engaged in these activities at the time that I lived there, but I was just curious. I lived there between 2003 and 2005. Do you know if Pumphrey had cremation operations during that time?
I believe they started somewhere around 1983 to 1984 is when they first installed their retort.
Okay, so
it's
sounds like it definitely would have been there when I lived there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Couple other questions. I wanted to ask you about issues of transfer between the main funeral home building and this other building. They will obviously be freestanding from each other. There won't be any closed connection corridor between the two of them. So, moving people back and forth from a ceremony in the main funeral home building to the other building, how would you envision that working? How would you envision that working, particularly with parking going on around both buildings, and also in terms of how you could discreetly move those who have passed from one building to the other as you need to in order to conduct your operations. How do you envision that working?
So we would be as discreet as we are currently. Upon, say we had a visitation or service at the funeral home, they would be loaded, the deceased, the casket would be loaded into a vehicle, driven right up to the next building, backed into the garage, and unloaded from there.
Okay.
We're not going to march a casket. You know, it's not going to be walked across up the sidewalk and into the building, no.
Okay. And what about the movement of visitors and family members? How do you envision that working? They would just be escorted from one building to the other through the sidewalk or through the parking lot?
Either or.
And of course, that would be a circumstance where you had, because of maybe the size or something of the gathering, that it had to be accommodated in the larger main funeral home, that it couldn't be accommodated in the viewing parlor of the converted house, because again, the house area, living area now, for the most part, is going to be converted into a viewing parlor. There could be more than one parlor, or it could be able to be separated by maybe a retractable wall or whatever. But again, that is going to function, obviously, the converted house as a viewing parlor as well, for families that want to be close to the cremation process, or even family, or even again, just because of a different circumstance where there's no cremation going on, but there's a need for another parlor space to be in operation while the main funeral home is being used. So it provides flexibility in several different ways for Bob to have a funeral parlor in that converted house.
Okay, so just to clarify, the idea is that that separate building would also be able to be used as an additional funeral parlor, whether or not a cremation is happening.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the main use of it is a funeral home, a funeral parlor, and the cremation facility and equipment is accessory and allows for another service to be offered in the broader range of services that Bob and the Duvall family offers now.
Okay, just a couple more questions. Thanks. What's the cost differential between burial services and cremation services?
Oh.
I mean, I realize you can get the deluxe version or you can get the basic version of either, I suppose, but.
I would say it's half.
It's half.
Yes, at least.
The cremation is roughly half the cost in general of burial.
Well, yeah. Cremation, you can have a visiting and a service, and it would be as much as doing a visiting service and then going on to a cemetery. So, right. But a direct cremation where you're not having all of the different visiting and service options is probably half of what a traditional service is, depending upon the merchandise someone chooses, if they choose.
Yeah, and Robert, I realize you're not necessarily in the business of running cemeteries. That's different. But you know, in terms of the long-term maintenance costs of a cemetery plot versus the one-time cost of cremation, I don't know if you all have any data on that kind of stuff, but that might be interesting for us to see a comparison. And I sort of had the same question about environmental impacts. I don't know if Jeffrey has any information about this, or if you could get it. Sort of studies comparing the overall environmental impacts of burial versus cremation. I'm kind of curious about that.
I don't have any.
I don't have any of that prepared for you, but I can see what we can get and email it over to you.
Sure, thank you. All right, so I got, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to Mike and then Lorianne.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I want to thank my colleagues for their questions again. As Ryan said, many of the things that I would have asked have already been asked. So I want to continue on the thread that Ryan brought up about the separation of the buildings and how that works out on basically the property. And I was just curious. I know that to use an existing building, the adaptive reuse of a residence has some efficiencies, some cost savings. I'm just wondering, Bob, Robert, if you considered building the same facility basically adjacent to the existing facility so that you could connect them by a breezeway or something. But they were closer together so that you wouldn't have this issue of transporting the deceased from one place to another, as well as the transit of the families in the course of a service. Why not just expand the existing building to include this, the crematory, as well as the additional parlors? Have you thought about that?
We didn't. I can tell you probably about 15 years ago, we looked into doing an addition on the building. And because of, and I'm could be completely wrong here, but from my best recollection, there's many issues regarding a water main that runs through the middle of our property as to what we could add or not add onto our building, and it became such an expense that we couldn't get anywhere. The budget wouldn't allow for the cost of having to redo these things, and I can't remember whether we would even get approval because of the water main.
Okay.
Sewer line that runs through there. There's like a 6-foot sewer line. So no, I didn't. And, you know, ideally, you know, so first off, we bring deceased people every day into the funeral home, and we're very discreet. We're very conscious of, you know, really of the deceased out of respect to them. And we would, you know, really strive to maintain that. And ideally, if we have this, and it, you know, we would try to have our visiting and services when it's a cremation up at the facility, so there's not a back and forth. You know, even if there's nothing going on at our facility at 10 East Deer Park, but there was going to be a service with a viewing prior to the cremation, it wouldn't be a situation where I'd want it to be at 10 East Deer Park. I'd rather it be at 14. So there is no transferring of people back and forth.
Okay, so at 14, will there be offices in that building as well, or will all the offices still be in 10?
They'll still be in 10.
Okay. So one of the things that I think, you know, as Ryan talked about the images that people have of what the word crematory means, when I looked at the rendering, I didn't see a chimney anywhere in the building, but when I looked at the photographs, there is a chimney at the east end of the residence.
Yeah.
So where is that going to move? What's it going to look like? Is it going to be tall? Is it going to be, you know, intrusive? Is going to be hidden by the front of the building, or what?
Yeah, I appreciate that. The reason we didn't add it is we're not, we can't predict right now what the height will be, and that's part of what the state regulates as well. One of the best practices is to maintain a certain stack height to better disperse the emissions. Again, even after the other measures are taking place, whatever does come out, to better disperse it, that makes it more environmentally of the better practice, obviously. So we're not exactly sure. So we don't want to put a chimney on there because we don't know. It would be in the back on the addition. And if you want to go to that slide, I can point it out. Where the addition is, it would be towards the back of the addition on the roof. And it would look like a residential chimney. If you look at the existing house, has a chimney on it, which actually is fairly, for a chimney, for a smaller house, it's fairly tall.
Pretty tall.
Yeah, I'd say about 5 feet. I was out there today. I'd say 4 feet or so. The rule of thumb, the rule of thumb, if you will, and Jeffrey, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is approximately 3 feet above the top point of a structure within 50 feet of where the facility is located. In our particular case, we don't have any structures within 50 feet. So we could be, and I'm just saying this again, this is part of what the state will do when they review the equipment and the modeling. We could be 3 feet above the roof line of the addition, which is again about what a standard residential chimney would look like. But I can't represent that as a definite yet because it's, yeah, there you can see the existing.
Right.
And then if you go to the architectural, if you want to, the architectural rendering, you know, yeah, so if you go to right there, okay, so I continue to think that if I play with my monitor, my mouse, you can see it, but I know you can't. If you look at the roof line there, rear south elevation, the stack, and again, Jeffrey, correct me if I'm wrong, the stack would likely go at the peak there or off to the side of the peak, but that's where it would go. So it would be behind, and the height is to be determined.
So there wouldn't be a brick chimney foundation on the outside of the building. Everything would be interior.
I don't think that there would be, but Jeffrey, what do you think on that? I always imagined a stack on top, but maybe you could.
So you're correct. The typical rule of thumb is 36 inches above the nearest peak within 50 feet. If there's nothing within 50 feet of the stack, then it would be basically the peak of the roof of the same building. Most often what happens in this case is the architect will design a facade around the stack to match the building. So if it's a brick building, they'll put a brick facade. If it's siding, they'll put some other type of decorative facade around it, so it just blends right in with the rest of the building.
So can you estimate the distance of the stack, the chimney, from the sidewalk on West Deer Park Drive, on East Deer Park Drive?
So the addition is 20 feet in, approximately 20 feet in width. So you're 20 feet or so to the existing house. The existing house is, Bob, would you say the existing house is maybe?
I've got that info, Scott. This is Phil Rhodes, the civil engineer working on the job. So the back edge of the existing house is 49 feet from the property line, and the sidewalk. So about 50 feet.
Okay.
So you're about 70-ish feet to the sidewalk area, and actually you've got a few feet of yard as well. So which gives you a magnitude of distance.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. Thank you. And I guess the last question again is for Robert. And this is your business. It's a family business. You've been a part of Gaithersburg for a long time. You've served a lot of families.
Yes, sir.
I think you've, in the way that you provide the services to the community, you've served the community in a lot of ways as well as a solid business.
Thank you.
So the question is this a make or break deal for your business? If this doesn't happen, what happens? Would you consider moving to a location where you could do this, perhaps outside of the city, or would you continue to operate as you do now, offering the services that you do?
I haven't given that thought. I mean, this was my first option. I don't know, being honest, I really don't know. I don't know how. I know the industry is moving this way. I haven't looked into, I don't know the cost of purchasing property and rezoning or getting something built. I just don't know.
No, I imagine the industry has these same challenges wherever they decide to locate. So,
right.
But I just thought I would ask that. So, thank you very much.
Michael, I'd like to say too, I envision that nobody would even know that this is a crematory. There's not going to be signage there. It's going to maintain that facade of a house. The chimney should look exactly along the lines of the other chimney. It should just look like another residence in the neighborhood.
Well, I think that's part of the, I don't know, perhaps that's some of the concern that's been expressed, is that what it is and what it looks like are not the same thing. And I think you know, I think we've touched on that as well. So anyway, I just want to thank you for your, thank you all for your answers, and I think I'm done for now. Thanks.
We'll go to Lori Ann then.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to all of our guests, our applicant, and my colleagues for their questions, and staff for putting together this information for us to discuss this new addition to the funeral home. Since Mike brought this up, I did want to ask about the chimney, about the potential noise from the chimney. I know that was something that was communicated from our residents, that there's a louder noise, that there's a fan within this particular chimney that's used for a crematorium. Can you tell me more about the actual infrastructure of the chimney? It's not like a wood fire burning chimney, but what exactly would the noise level be that one could expect if they live nearby?
Jeffrey?
Sure. So the blower motor, which is the fan that is on the machine, is absolutely not located in the stack. It's located on the back of the unit and is hooked into an air header that circulates air throughout the unit. The sound that a crematorium makes is from the intake of that. The sound that's emitted is basically about the same level as a residential air conditioning unit outside.
Okay. And how far is the property line of this proposed crematorium to the closest residential home? Closest residence? Because I know
The actual home?
I'm sorry?
From building to building?
No, not from building to building, from the proposed new location to the next residential community or residence.
I think the closest would be on the other side of Bean Hill Court.
If we can, yeah, and I'd ask Phil to do the measuring. when we decide, let's do two. Phil, why don't you take it? One is from the rear of the addition to the property line to the south. And maybe if we had a vicinity map or something like that up, it would help so everyone can see what we're talking about. So we're probably going to give you two measurements at least.
Okay.
Yeah, so the
Are you able to pull that up, or we'll just?
Oh, I would ask if the controller.
maybe that first slide in the presentation, the aerial photo would be the best one to look at.
Packet page 22.
Can we zoom in a bit, Jasmine?
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's start with I guess it would be to Bean Court, to that property line. And so if you could do that, Phil, and show Councilmember Sales where you're measuring and what that number results in.
So this is from the addition or from the existing building?
From the addition.
Okay, so the addition is will be in the southwest corner of the existing building. So from the addition to that property line, and I'm sorry, I'm eyeballing this, but it's 70 to 80 feet probably
when you say
that addition.
Which property line are you taking it to?
From the dark orange, the bold one.
Okay, so to our property
so
line.
then to get all the way to that residence, the right of way for Bean Hill Court is 50 feet. So it's over 100 feet from the addition to that existing property on the east.
And while we're on this, just to give a little more information, you can see a heavy orange line here, and that's the property that's shown on the concept plan. But if you go just adjacent to that a short ways, you'll see a lighter yellow line. We're currently working with to settle title to that because we do believe that the Duvall family owns that strip as well. And so when if this progresses to final site plan, the area of the property might include that additional strip there, just as a piece of information. It doesn't affect any, it gives a little more buffer, if you will, on that side for maybe some landscaping, something like that. But just wanted to let you know that was the case. The title is being resolved as we currently. So
Okay.
talking about 100 or so feet to the property line of the nearest house, I guess is the best way to put it. If you want us to take it to the south as well, Phil, you want to do that number?
Yeah. So just to give you some sense of scale of this drawing, if you see that the two kind of parallel lines on either side of Bean Hill Court, that's 50 feet.
Okay.
So if you take measure from the building addition going south, it would be between 100 and 150 feet.
And that Bean Hill Court is city right away, I believe. Yes.
So I don't know if this may be a question for staff. Given our various zones in the different communities, do we have any limitations of certain zones abutting to residential communities? Any restrictions or minimum amount of feet or? So I'll answer. So as part of this concept site plan, correct me, this Mayor Council can establish sort of setback requirements for specific uses. So in the CD zone, there's no specific setback requirements in the zone, but that'd be established as part of this concept site plan. So what about residential units in residential communities? Are there any restrictions of any industrial or businesses within a certain amount of feet of a residential community? On the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I can look that up for you. Okay. And then I had a question about the crematorium process. I know that as we continue to develop, people are always looking for greener ways of doing business. And I'm not too familiar, but I heard that there's a new industry of green funerals and wanted to know if that had been, that option had been explored or if that...
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My only information I have about green funerals is green burials. I'm not familiar with green cremation. Most of them are this method that I know of. I've heard of people are starting to talk about a form of cremation using water, but I know absolutely nothing about that.
Okay, all right, no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've gone through the council. Now it's time to hear from the public. Tech team, if you could play the instructional video one more time, that'd be great. I'm not hearing it. Tech team, could you start it over with sound?
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
Excellent. Okay. I will note to the public, everyone gets a chance to testify one time. If you get 3 minutes to testify. If you have more than that, or if you think of more things you'd like to say after this, you can submit your testimony in writing. It's going to be considered exactly the same as any oral testimony. Let's start. Tech team, if you can bring up Carol Johnson. Carol, just unmute yourself. State your name, state your address or neighborhood, and go ahead and start.
Yes, this is Carol Johnson. Hi, this is Carol Johnson. I live on Gaither Street. Thank you very much. I have submitted a letter And I would direct the city council and mayor to take a look, because I've raised questions specifically to the city about what they define as a funeral home and what the prohibited uses are in zone CD. But I won't go over those in limited time tonight. But I would like to point out a couple of things to Duval. Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate you kept it short. And I must say, I'm one of the ones who you served. My husband was, you took a direct cremation for him in 2005. And it was upsetting that he had to go to Virginia, even though we didn't have a service for the cremation. So I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm also concerned very much about the toxicity and the environmental impacts, because it's not just mercury. We have a lot of people with implants. You know, they've got titanium, they've got chromium, they've got nickel, and it hasn't been explained to me clearly tonight what happens. Those metals are vaporized. Where do they go? Do they come out the stack? Are they part of the particulates? How do they get cooled? I would like to hear from Jeff more about that. And then germane to the environmental and making a bigger parking lot, this is the headwater of Muddy Branch, and it would be really wonderful if you guys could take your discreet and good business model and good partnership and community leadership and make the parking lot permeable and add native landscaping, and really take pains to make it as little as an environmental impact as possible. And I guess the last question back, I think some really good questions were asked about just how the logistics all work. I was wondering if you're going to have a garage at 14 so that you can, you know, load the casket or the transport the deceased, you know, out of view on both sites. So with that, I'll stop and thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. And we'll allow the applicant to address questions after everyone gets a chance to speak. So tech team, if you could bring up, and forgive me if I mispronounce his name, Zila Olfat. And Zila, once you get on, please just unmute yourself, state your name and address, and begin your testimony.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Faraz. Hi, my name is Faraz. I'm the son of Jida Olfat, and I live in the West Deer Park in the Culver Place. I'm a homeowner, and I'm actually a doctor. So I would like to testify to see the risks that will come in this situation. So with the establishment of the incinerator, there'll be increased risk of carcinogenic materials in the atmosphere. I don't care how odorless or colorless the smoke is, but the carcinogenic materials are the ones we don't see. So with that, there will be increased risk of cancer, specifically the lung cancer and the breast cancer in this area. That's why they don't make power stations, nuclear power stations, in the middle of cities. So if you really want to make an incinerator, just go and build in the middle of desert in Arizona, not in the middle of cities. I'm not gonna get cancer while Mr. Duval makes millions. And the same reason I don't want this incinerator here is the same reason Mr. Duval will not make the incinerator in his own garage. It's because that's where he lives. So I would like to thank the City Council for this meeting, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next tech team, if you could bring up Jennifer Jackson. Jennifer, just state your name and begin your testimony and your address.
Hi, I'm sorry, we have two computers going at the same time.
Well, Jennifer, if you guys just want to mute one.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Jackson. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Neeks, I think you're just going to have to close it while I'm doing my testimony. My name is Jennifer Jackson. I'd like to thank the previous doctor for his passionate testimony, because he's absolutely right. You know, I think that previously we had Ryan who said that, you know, he was walking past a funeral home saying that, you know, he didn't smell anything and he didn't notice anything, but that's anecdotal. That isn't evidence that this is not going to be able to be causing different diseases that are here. But yet we have a doctor here who's saying that these odors are going to be odorless as well as colorless. And so we already have the city trying to approve a Wawa, which again is telling me that, oh, you know, there's going to be no emissions, there's going to be nothing else, even though I know that they're pumping gasoline and that there's going to be car emissions. I'm surprised there's even greenhouse gases and that the earth is warming, because every company that comes around here says that, oh no, it's not us, it's completely somebody else. We don't have any emissions. People are dying of cancer, not because of us, because of what we're doing. So I don't believe them. I think the city needs to have its own environmental studies being done. I'm so tired of companies coming in here telling us what is not. We have people that are being paid. The people that are installing these incinerators in the community are being paid. So what are they going to do? They're going to tell us, oh no, these are absolutely safe. If it's so safe, put it in your backyard. If it's so safe, go and put it in your neighborhood. Don't go and use Deer Park as a dumping ground for all of these industrial practices. Right now, that house, it was a house that people were living in. But now they're going to use it and move it into an industrial practice, not a commercial practice. There's not going to be shops and cafes being placed there. It's going to be an incinerator. And so they're going to be burning bodies inside of an incinerator right inside of our community. And this can't stand. This council needs to stop using Deer Park neighborhood as a dumping ground. I don't want to see the Wawa, and I don't want to see an incinerator in my community. We have to go and escalate this. I don't know what we need to do, but it's tiring that they don't care about our property values. You can go across the Crown, put it in Crown, put it in the industrial park. Those are where those things go. They don't go inside of our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Laura Stolman, tech team. Laura, once you unmute, just state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go ahead with your testimony.
Yes, my name's Laura Stolman. I'm a business owner directly across the street, Medallion Financial Group at 13 East Deer Park. And so we would be, you know, less than 100 feet away from the incinerator. Along with all of the mercury and metals, you also have plastics from breast implants, silicone, plutonium from pacemakers. So unless those are removed before cremation and disposed of some other way, you have those toxins going into the environment. I just am very opposed to it on, you know, many levels. Toxicity being one of the many. So many of the other things have been stated. You know, being directly across the street, yes, we are a professional Class C business. We have 17 tenants, but they're all single office, small, you know, attorneys. And, you know, we're there 9 to 5, pretty much most of everybody there. And so, I'm just not sure that this is an appropriate place to put it. With 67 other incinerators in Maryland, I'm not sure why you're having to go an hour into Alexandria, Virginia to find an incinerator. I think that there's probably a better place to put it, or one that could be used. I'm not sure why there's quite so many that need to be out there. So I will give back the rest of my time, and thank you all for your time and consideration and opening this up for comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Patrick Casey. Patrick, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Hello, council and mayor and other residents. I'm Pat Casey. I live in the East Deer Park neighborhood.
Patrick, we need you to speak way up into your microphone.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so I'm Pat Casey, and I live in the East Deer Park neighborhood, a community of over 400 concerned residents, and we vote. I have also submitted written testimony about my significant concerns in which I object vehemently to this large redevelopment and addition of this large crematorium. The proposal as it now stands is wholly inadequate and raises more questions than it answers. For example, how many funerals are we now talking about? How many cremations are going to be included? And I mean today, next year, and in 2, 3, or 5 years from now. What is the future forecast from the funeral industry regarding the increase in the percentage of cremations that's going to start taking place? As we've already seen, it's already up 50%. So this proposal should be rejected until it can begin answering some of our concerns and our questions and tell us exactly what this new development will be comprised of and what its impact will be on our community. And I would appreciate it if the council members would begin asking some questions regarding the concerns of the residents and stop acting like advocates for the funeral parlor industry. Some of the comments I've heard tonight I find to be disingenuous from those people regarding this proposal. I'm a little concerned, and I think that somebody thinks that we're extremely naive to believe some of the contentions that we've heard here tonight about the impact on both the environment, the neighborhood, and traffic and future operations in this facility. The facility is not appropriate at its current, the proposed facility is not going to be appropriate for its current location, and it should be relocated to a commercial or industrial location where it truly belongs. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, tech team, if you could bring up Suzanne Ward, that would be great. Suzanne, just state your name, address, and neighborhood, and begin your testimony.
Hi, my name is Susie Ward, and I live at 437 Gaither Street, less than 500 feet from the proposed crematorium. I appreciate everybody's explanations. I at least have a little bit more information than I did before. But I'm not clear as to how much, like what are the actual levels that are mandated or allowed by the EPA. As of 2010, the EPA wasn't actually specifying any kind of regulations for crematoria because they stated that human bodies were not solid waste. So they weren't going to regulate that under the Clean Air Act. Now, perhaps they've changed that and have since made some sort of stipulations. And if that's the case, I would appreciate if someone could give me a link because I've tried to find those regulations and I can't find them. Also, I'd like to know what the Maryland Department of the Environment, what their regulations are so that I could know if your crematorium would be meeting those. And I'd also like to know what kind of actual scrubbers that this crematorium would have, and would they really be taking out vapor, mercury vapor, and all those other noxious emissions that are the things that that are deleterious to our health. So I'd just like to know where I can get those regulations, those stipulations that presumably I have the impression from the testimony that they exist, but I can't find them. And I guess that's because the EPA does say, they have said that mercury is actually a very noxious, environmentally persistent substance, and it accumulates in our bodies, and our bodies are unable to really get rid of it very, very much at all. It just accumulates in us. It goes to our brains, it goes to our kidneys, it causes birth defects. So I'd just like to have those questions answered. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Max Bloomfield. Max, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood and begin.
Hi, my name is Max Bloomfield. I live in the apartments in 531 South Frederick, right across from the Duvall Funeral Home. So I wanted to hit on something that people have been skirting around but not really hitting, and that's that this meeting is about changing what the zoning is for that area that you want to reconstruct into a crematory. And so that means that you already know that that doesn't belong here. And what you're trying to do is change the rules so that you can put it there. I know for a fact, you can look it up on YouTube, that if you put a particularly large person in a crematory and you look away for too long, there's going to be thick black smoke and it's not going to be sufficiently contained. Likewise, are you planning on offering this crematory service to other funeral homes in the area, bumping up the number of cremations you're going to be doing? Like, I have so many questions that the councilmen are not really looking into about the deleterious health effects. And I noticed earlier that regarding the smokestack, you said that it had to be a certain height. Like, surrounding buildings are up to 3 stories tall. How big is this smokestack going to be? You said you know it needed to be tall, but then you don't know exactly how tall it needs to be. So what's the answer there? So yeah, that's a lot of it. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mary Evely, please state your name and address or neighborhood and begin.
Hello, everyone. Mary Evely here. So I live in the Summit Hall Reserve community, which is a few steps away from the Ball home. And similar to my neighbors, I strongly oppose the, the crematorium. They've made I think an example of Humphreys, right? So just because it's odorless and it's colorless, it doesn't mean that it's not toxic to our health. And they're saying that it's near a school and it's near an apartment. Well, that is a commercial area. It is not similar to our densely populated residential area where there are parks. You see little kids running around being walked by their parents, and now with COVID, all we have is outside. And then we have pets, okay? And then we have schools and we have homes. So we also do not know the impact of crematorium in residential area. And I, for one, do not want to be a guinea pig of, oh, there's cancer 10 years from now because there is a crematorium in my neighborhood. And so, again, I would just, I concur with the rest of my neighbors who will strongly oppose this. This belongs in a commercial and industrial site, not in a residential area. And, you can read articles, not just from US-based, studies, but Canada, that there are emissions. There is carbon dioxide and monoxide and mercury in the air, even though there's no smoke. Just because there's smoke or no smoke doesn't mean that it doesn't harm humans. So I am, offended that, oh, it is less than a burger joint. No, it is not. So I would love for the city of Gaithersburg to really look into this, because I would not like, if Mr. Duvall is okay, then yes, he can have the crematorium in his garage, but I highly doubt that he would not have that. So thank you very much for your time, and that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Next, tech team, bring up Christopher Regari. Christopher, when you get on, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Christopher Ruggieri.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, my name is Christopher Ruggieri. I live in Observatory Heights on Cedar Avenue, approximately 3,700 feet from the proposed crematorium. I have a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 35-year-old wife with asthma. My concern is primarily environmental. A number of air pollutants result from the cremation process. These emissions result from fuel combustion within the furnace, combustion of the funeral casket, and the combustion of the body itself. A study by the EPA crematorium furnace in the U.S. found that in excess of 60 pollutants were emitted during the cremation process. The majority of these are silent killers, odorless, and invisible. Many emissions from power plant smokestacks are also clear and smokeless these days, but they still are pollutants and cause respiratory illness. Emissions include a range of dioxins and furans, which are part of diesel exhaust trucks, but are also included in waste incineration, open burn pits, metal production, and a byproduct of polychlorinated biphenyl combustion. Other major emissions from crematoriums include nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, mercury, hydrogen, fluoride, hydrogen chloride, non-methane volatile organic compounds, and other heavy metals. Is the air permitting inspection process done while a body is being cremated to account for all these possible pollutants? Particulates such as dust, soot, and ash and other unburned particles originate from the cremation container, human remains, and other contents of the container. Mercury emissions from dental fillings that may contain 5 to 10 grams, depending on the number of types used. The composite fillings that are gaining popularity do not have any data on the emissions from the combustion of that material. Non-methane volatile organic compounds are produced from incomplete or insufficient combustion of hydrocarbons contained in the fuel's body and casket. They rarely result in short-term acute health effects or foul odor, but can lead to dangerous chronic health hazards that may not be immediately linked to the crematorium. What happens if the air pollution is drastically out of compliance? Does the cremation cease and the body sit in the cremation until the air pollution issues are addressed? With the country struggling to come to terms with air pollution from large polluters, such as coal-fired plants, fracking, and vehicle traffic, it would be a shame for the city of Gaithersburg to not fully assess the impact to their citizens for what is essentially a furnace burning materials resulting in emissions. It is essentially a power plant with all the pollution, but no power generation. I respectfully request that the Gaithersburg City Council to mandate an independent air pollution and environmental impact study, make that study publicly available, and require the Duvall Funeral Home to provide details on any and all pollution mitigation and administrative engineering controls to include hazardous waste disposal accumulating in the furnace. I'll suggest the City of Gaithersburg partner with Duvall Funeral Home and funeral homes within the city to research and advocate for a more environmentally friendly alternative to cremation for interment of the dead, such as sea burial, coral reef, and alkaline hydrolysis, which is estimated to be 1/10 of the carbon footprint of cremation. The EPA is a bare minimum, and the City of Trees should strive for better. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Walter Umana, that would be great. Walter, just state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin.
Hi, this is Walter Umana. I live off of Gaither Street in the East Deer Park neighborhood. To kind of, I think, express myself in the simplest terms, I think it's too close. I think there are too many environmental and health impacts, negative impacts on the residents in this area. And I think it would be very inhumane to allow for this to be approved for financial gain. That would be a great mistake. And as I expressed earlier with the issue that I had with Wawa being approved, I think that the Gaithersburg officials are drastically failing the people of this city who are just as important as anyone else in the Kentlands area, in the North Potomac area, and the places where these type of institutions are not necessarily being implemented. You don't see these type of commercial buildings being allowed in these places, and that's why. Why is that? Why is it that this area is considered the dumping place where projects that are just ridiculously approved in a place where people live with families and they want to live a healthy life, but these projects that are negatively impacting the environment, the way of living, they're being approved, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I'd like to echo all of the opinions and beliefs that the people before me have said, and I think that this should be denied, and I think there needs to be a greater investigation on the type of impact that this will have in a place that is so close to where people live. where people want to start families and to have a healthy way of living without having to worry about if they're gonna either get cancer or pass that on to generations after them. I think if anyone could rightfully feel that it would be safe to do this, let's see how you'd feel if this was in your backyard, or if this was even in your neighborhood. I don't think that anyone could rightfully approve this and let this pass if this directly applied to you. Thank you for the time, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Tech team, if you could bring up Shanika Whitehurst. Shanika, just state your name, address, or neighborhood and begin.
My name is Shanika Whitehurst. I live in East Deer Park on Gaithersburg Street, just shortly away from the proposed site. I'd like to discuss mainly, when I look at this, one, we're talking about the incineration of bodies, which are carbon material. One, I find it very hard to believe that you're not going to release emissions. There's not going to be smoke, whether odorless or not. What's going to account for PM10? What's going to account for PM2.5 and other gases that have been mentioned by other folks already from being emitted? Secondly, I feel that this part of the city, is exposed to industrial practices that would not even be considered if we lived in Rio, if we lived in Crown, if we lived in Kentlands. So why does the 20877 area code, why is that okay that these practices are here? First is the approval of the Wawa, which regardless is an industrial practice there. Just the number of pumps and the number of traffic and such that we've already gone down that hill will suggests to me it's an industrial practice. And now an incinerator inherently is an industrial type of practice as well. And even when you refer to it as a smokestack is something that I don't call a residential chimney, right? We don't refer to those as smokestacks normally. I just want to point that out. More recently, we've seen a lot of social justice issues that have come to play. The city had a number of protests and such. Part of those social justice issues are environmental justice issues. And it is an environmental justice problem to me that if you're going to constantly allow industrial practices to come to one side of the city, and it just so happens that the average median income of this side of the city is under $100,000, what do you have to make above $100,000 just to not to be exposed to it, just to not worry about whether your children are going to be exposed to certain substances? And I have a newborn, and that's one of those things that majorly concerns me. An environmental justice community is not just about racial demographics. It's also about socioeconomic issues. And this just shows as another example that this city is a tale of two cities. And you see how you treat this portion of the city. And if it's just about income, then that's just a shame. That's a pity. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Next, tech team, bring up Richard Lindstrom. Richard, when you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin.
My name is Richard Lindstrom. Pam, can you turn off your? We have two computers in the room. My name is Richard Lindstrom. I live at 421 Gaither Street. Now, East Deer Park is a fine neighborhood, says the realtor showing us around. It's settled and quiet, attractively planned, well-maintained, socially diverse, near to schools, shopping, parks, and a crematorium. There went the sale. I'm concerned with emissions and with process. When in operation, this industrial-sized furnace will be the largest single point source of combustion in the city. This facility belongs in an industrial area. For example, in one of the vacant properties along Oakmont Avenue near the railroad. This application is dated February 10th, but the signs on the street did not go up until mid-July, just 2 weeks before this meeting. The preliminary plans were made available just a week ago. Not all the neighbors have been notified even now, but even in this short time, the Durwood Gaithersburg group on nextdoor.com has 114 messages on this topic as of this afternoon, and more have come in during this meeting. None of them are cheering the prospect of a crematory furnace in the neighborhood. Now, I have little quarrel with the Duval Funeral Home. Aside from the bright lights in their parking lot, the property is attractive and well maintained. Occasional large funerals have caused little disruption to the neighborhood traffic, and then only for a short time. I do question their judgment in asking for a crematorium on this property, and question even more the attitude of the city in not asking more questions. Once again, just as in the Wawa debacle, the neighborhood west of 355 is becoming less attractive by the action and inaction of the mayor and council, with little regard for the well-being of the residents. During the 48 years my wife and I have lived here, we've seen the core of the city deteriorate. It may be time to leave, but not before the next election. Mr. Mayor and council members, please take no positive action on this plan until our questions are all answered and the pleasant atmosphere of East Deer Park is adequately protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Tamara Weber. Tamara, when you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and begin.
Hi, Tammy Weber, 103 Hutton, and I've lived here for 28 years. And I just want to mimic what everyone was saying. And the person that talked about the zoning, that was the first thing that came up in my mind too. And then I'm thinking about how the state and the county and the city and everybody wants you to do more dense residential near the subway. So, and I just keep the city, keep seeing the city passing things that are more business and doing rezoning towards businesses and putting things in that are detrimental. Same thing everyone else is saying. I've just seen that erosion going on. And I've said, why don't buy us all out then? Buy us all out if you want to pave over our whole neighborhood and make it a business development, then do that. It'll cost you, hundreds of millions of dollars, but you should think about that if this is the way you're going to proceed. So the zoning issues, and then I was looking too at some of the same studies she was saying, and I don't agree. I mean, they're kind of poo-pooing or putting down some of these things, saying, oh, people are getting amalgam fillings so much, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm in my 50s, and I probably have more amalgam fillings than a lot of people, unfortunately, and I don't plan to die very soon. So I would say 20 to 30 years, maybe you're going to have less mercury. Studies I've read say any amount of mercury vapors are dangerous. And some of the studies that I've read in the little time I've had to look at it have said they should be, these kind of facilities should be more in rural areas, which I think my hometown in Pennsylvania has put them in rural areas, even though the funeral homes that offer cremation services have them someplace like the Mall is. I have no problem with them expanding their, parlor, having more expanding for the parking lot and their parlors and that kind of thing, but I'm against the crematorium for all the reasons that these other people have stated. And I request that the council members also would try to listen more to the residents and serve the residents than serving the financial gains of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Tech team, next testimony is Ghislaine Tasyko. Ghislaine, when you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ghislaine Tasyko Prado, and my family and I reside at 519 South Frederick Avenue, Gaithersburg, Maryland, 20877. I respectfully request that the application filed by Duval Funeral Home to convert an existing single-family home to a funeral home with a viewing parlor and crematorium be denied. My family and I have called this East Deer Park, South Frederick Avenue, our community for the past 22 years. This street not only represents the place where I took my first steps onto a school bus, the parking lots where I would learn to ride my first bike, or the unintentional California stop so many of us make onto South Frederick. It also represents one of the zip codes most heavily impacted by COVID-19 in Montgomery County, Maryland. Long-standing and systemic health and social inequities have put my community at increased risk of getting sick from COVID-19. This is our reality. The building of a crematorium presents two very different yet overlapping concerns for the 20877 community and the city of Gaithersburg community at large. First, in 2010, the EPA stated that toxins are released into the environment through the cremation of human bodies, the most dangerous being mercury. During the cremation process, the mercury in the body becomes vaporized into a colorless, odorless gas, unseen by the human eye. Mercury is especially dangerous in this heated, vaporized form because when it is inhaled, it is quickly absorbed by the bloodstream and carried to the brain and other organs, moving through the body undetected. Even very small amounts of mercury can be dangerous. The EPA confirms that there are serious health effects from even very low-level exposure to mercury. Second, cremation requires a lot of fuel and it results in millions of tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. It is estimated that one cremation produces an average of 534.6 pounds of carbon dioxide. The basic mechanics of climate change are simple. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere traps heat. More carbon dioxide means more heat is trapped across the earth, causing it to warm up. The Duvall family and their funeral home serves as a cornerstone of our community, providing comfort to friends and families during difficult times. But there are alternatives to what they are proposing. In living in the city for 22 years, two things are clear. One, we make mistakes. But two, when presented with the opportunity to act, we do not cower in response, but lead with our guiding principles. While addressing the historic, systemic health and social inequities in our community does not stop here. It is a starting point. These are our defining moments that tell the true tales of our priorities. Muchas gracias por su consideración. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ghislaine. Tech team next, if you could bring up Dina Saunders. And I will just make one last call because I don't see any other hands up beyond Dina's. If anybody else wants to speak. Okay, I see one more. And if any others, just use the Zoom raise your hand function and we'll get to you. Dina, state your name, address, or neighborhood and go right ahead.
Good evening, council members, and to our new city manager. I'm Dina Saunders with Audubon Square. Whereas I don't live directly in the neighborhood, I do go through the neighborhood where Duvall is. I find having a crematorium in the neighborhood highly offensive. While I was reading their proposal, they want to expand the parking lot to accommodate larger funerals. During this pandemic, funerals are limited to very few people who can attend. The reason I say offensive is that they want to bring this into a residential area where you have stores, schools, and residents. People who live in the surrounding neighborhood don't need to breathe in toxic fumes from mercury, and not to mention those who have autoimmune disorders like myself. I have sarcoidosis that can affect any part of my body at any given time. I don't need to be exposed to toxic fumes. Children don't need to be exposed to this. Children walk around there, and if they see this building with, let's say, no chimney, they're going to wonder what's going on in there. Children are highly curious. I talked to some of my congregants, and this is what they had to say about crematoriums in residential areas. They said that during the crematorium process, mercury is disposed into the environment, which is unhealthy to breathe. And this could be depending on zoning laws. My rabbi, who was recovering from the COVID, says that to him, having crematorium in the residential area is a highly unlikely idea. And there was nothing that has been mentioned about having permits for having a crematorium in the area. Now, Ryan had mentioned about bringing up thoughts. Well, having a crematorium has reminiscence of the Holocaust. People, dying from there. I don't need to have that being reminded to me in my neighborhood. And if you Google what the crematory stacks say, it says crematory stacks shall discharge at least 11 feet above the roof peak and 27 feet above ground level. Now, I'm sure there could be better regulations on that, but as people said on Next Door Neighbor, they don't want it in their neighborhood. Council members, please listen to us. You can listen to us about Kelly Park, sorry. I'm not bringing about Wawa, but no one wants a crematorium in their neighborhood. Duval does great business, but we don't need a crematorium Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Dina. Next, tech team, if you can bring up Danny Rivas. Danny, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood and begin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Rivas. I live on 435 Gaither Street. Like Miss Suzanne Ward, I just live a couple of feet away from the Duval Funeral Home. My family and I have been living in the neighborhood for nearly 20 years and practically my whole life. And really, if Duval Funeral Home really intends on expanding for the sake of reducing COVID risks, then there would be no proposal for a crematorium. I have a younger brother who has asthma and he's very sensitive to air pollutants. And, you know, just by going to work or the grocery store, some of us are already risking our health, you know, by wearing masks and, you know, trying to be safe. With the proposed expansion, we would also be at risk while being at home, which I find ridiculous. It's become very clear based on some of the comments some of our neighbors have said, is that mercury in the air would be yet another respiratory risk on top of the virus. Yes, mercury has no smoke and is odorless as mentioned before, but it's still a toxic vapor. You know, mercury has been found to lead to problems with the brain and nervous system, as well as the lungs, kidneys, and immune system. And, you know, one of the reasons why my brother has asthma is because he has one kidney. And I really believe, based on some of the comments my fellow neighbors have made, we would all agree that a crematorium is irresponsible and frankly reckless. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, tech team, if you could bring up Lynn Nash. Lynn, just state your name and address or neighborhood and begin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Lynn Nash and I live in Saybrook. Tonight, I would like to cover 3 topics in my 3 minutes. First, Duval's request to modify their zoning to place a crematorium and a viewing place in an adjacent property. While Duval provides a unique service to the Gaithersburg area, I'm opposed to the zoning variance that they are requesting. Others already have and will deal with the environmental pollution issues such as mercury pollution, to which young children and unborn babies are most vulnerable. Instead, I would like to address neighborhoods which are being encroached upon by industrial zoning, reducing their quality of life. The adjacent neighborhood is well established. Homeowners purchased their homes long before the 355 strip developed and they expected that their value would grow. Instead, home values will be greatly impacted by smoke and odors associated with the crematorium, as well as the increased traffic associated with these additional services. I ask the City Council to hold the line, disapprove this request, and instead ask Duval to place a crematorium in an area already zoned as industrial. Second, in a recent Washington Post article entitled "Pandemic Underscores How Public Parks Shape Public Health," this article speaks to how uneven access to green spaces poses a health hazard that affects longevity and mental health. As you know, I have long been a proponent of keeping Kelly Park just as a multi-use park, especially for the lower income families in the 20877 zip code. As you well know, Kelly Park is the only multi-use park on the east side of Gaithersburg, despite protest of the 5 adjacent neighborhoods who were denied the opportunity to participate in the site selection process. In May, the City Council voted to give a substantial portion of the park for the building of a 740-child elementary school with an adjacent city-owned field. In return for the baseball, soccer field, volleyball, basketball, 2 tennis courts, and a tot lot, we'll get a school in our neighborhood that our kids may not attend. Is that just? And finally, after my comments on the city budget, of note, I was the only city resident who made an effort to provide comments. The mayor called me disgruntled and having a bad day. Mr. Mayor, I'm your constituent. I voted for you. You have a fiduciary responsibility to me. While we may disagree, I expect that you will always act as a professional, as I have. I've devoted a lot of my personal times on issues to make Gaithersburg better. I have come to you with science-based data, not emotion. As a professional politician, I don't expect you to call me names. You are out of bounds and I expect an apology.
Okay, thank you for that testimony. I will note I did not call you a name. I characterized the testimony, but I apologize for offending you. Next, we will go to Monica Lozada. Monica, just please unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Oh, good evening. My name is Monica Lozada. I live in Gaithersburg Street in East Deer Park. After listening to various people, I pretty much am in agreement. I don't want to repeat necessarily everything that everyone around the neighborhood is expressing regarding the concerns. I also object. One of the concerns that I did have, as well as other residents in my neighborhood, was there are quite a few residents in our neighborhood who are directly impacted by this funeral home in this area that do not, are, number one, are unaware what's going on, and number two, who do not speak English. And I feel that being in a diverse community that we are, especially when we have a high Hispanic, Spanish-speaking community, that Gaithersburg should consider posting these signs in bilingual, since we do have a high amount of people who do not speak English or speak Spanish in the community. So that's first of all. Second of all, I would like to thank for the information that you guys did provide. It did give a little bit more clarity on what the intentions of Deval is trying to do. However, I definitely feel and agree with the rest of the residents in the neighborhood that this is not the right location for a crematorium. I do not oppose having the funeral home there. It serves its purpose and I understand what it's for. However, since you're adjacent to a residential neighborhood, same as a Wawa, because I actually live right behind where the Wawa is supposed to be, it's a major concern. There's a place and time for everything, and the zoning when it comes to commercial and light commercial should be addressed accordingly, especially when you have residential parks, which we do have a park in Holly Drive here. We have the schools, environmental factors. That's my main concern, is environmental factors. You guys haven't addressed a lot of the environmental factors enough for, I don't think, any of us to feel comfortable. But that's all I have for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Pamela Lindstrom, and I will note this is the last raised hand that I see. If anybody else wants to testify, this is the last call. But Pamela, please unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
My name is Pamela Lindstrom. I live at 421 Gaither Street. I have some kind of disjointed comments. The first of my comments is that you've heard a level of outrage from enough people tonight that it seems to me that you all would get the message that you need to do more good public, you need to do more serious answers to our issues, our questions, or you face what Montgomery County actually faced as a consequence to locating the Pumphrey funeral home in a mixed-use, partly residential area. That is to say, Montgomery County now limits crematoria to industrial zones. And I would recommend that you look into industrial zones which are very conveniently located relative to Duval Funeral Home. For instance, along Oakmont Drive, there are kind of semi-underutilized semi-commercial, semi-industrial zoned land within the city. The other thing I want to say quickly is that if crematoria are such an accepted part of funeral homes, why is the city feel the need, at least, to be stingy with public information and even conceal what what Duval intends to do? For instance, why did Monica didn't say, she didn't give herself credit, but she is the one that provided any public information that the residents of all the garden apartments along Deer Park Drive got. The only public information they got was from Monica producing flyers in Spanish and handing them out, along with the help from a couple of other of our neighbors. Why was there such utterly stingy public notice given to us when the funeral home application was known from February? Why did we get just the legal minimum of 2 weeks notice and then only buy a sign that was...
Pam, we're at time. If you have more testimony, I encourage you to submit it in writing. We're going to go on to the next speaker. Tech team, if you could bring on Samad Saifuddin. Samad, when you come up, just state your name and address or neighborhood, and please go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Samad Saifuddin, and I'm also a resident of Summit Hall Reserve, which is on Deer Park, pretty much right next to Borough Park. And in addition to written email that I sent out to voice my opposition to approving this zoning modification, I don't believe that this hearing had enough sufficient information, and the mere point that the exhaust would be odorless and colorless is really just a moot point. And I also would like to say that there really should be like an independent voice, or essentially a study done, an environmental study done for the environmental concerns of this. This zip code really does need a little bit more zoning cohesiveness in general. And if there was a certain part of Gaithersburg, again, kind of the Crown area, whatever it may be, the Kentlands area, it definitely would have a little bit more of a different feel, having a crematorium in that particular area as well. And let's just put ourselves in that same shoe. This really doesn't make any sense having this here. Thanks so much for putting this hearing together, and I yield back my time.
Thank you. Tech team, you can go to Loretta Rivers, and Loretta, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Whoops. Yes, I'm Loretta Rivers. I live on Tulip Drive in the East Deer Park neighborhood. And I just have a comment. I echo everything that's been said here by my neighbors. And I just have a question about the submission. I keep coming back to that I can't see under the information that was published that this modification or this building or this crematorium could be allowed under the code. And it's been quoted in all of the submissions. And I'd just like somebody to comment on or tell us how this was, why this is allowed under the code. And does that mean that every funeral home in the city can have a crematorium if this is allowed under this code? And I love Duval. They've handled 2 arrangements for me. And I have nothing against them, but I just don't think this is the right place for this facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other testimonies from the public? Not seeing any. Okay, we will come back to the meeting. So first, if we can bring Jasmine up. Jasmine, are you there?
Right here.
Okay, Jasmine, can you speak to this use being allowed in the CD zone?
So under our definition of the funeral home, it says any building in which one or more parlors or rooms are maintained for the temporary resting place of dead human bodies pending final disposition thereof. Such building may also include the following space and facilities for the preparation of such bodies for burial or other final disposition. So according to our definition, a crematorium is allowed as an association with the funeral home. A standalone crematorium is not permitted in the city. The property is zoned CD. They're not going through any sort of rezoning application at all. So in the CD zone, all uses which are listed as permitted and not solely as a special exception or conditional uses in all zoning districts unless otherwise prohibited. And a funeral home is permitted use in the C2 zone. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. I wanted to open it up to the applicant. I'll just remind you of several issues that came up, and to the degree you guys want to respond now or respond later in writing. So there were a lot of concerns about emissions and the disposal of various elements: titanium, chromium, nickel, plastic, plutonium, mercury. There was talk about carcinogens. There was a question about the garage. And then there was a question about where people can go and look up the relevant EPA and MDE regulations. So I want to put that out there and give you guys a chance to respond to whatever you want to respond to.
I can respond to a couple of them, not all of them.
Actually, if I could.
Sure.
Yeah, what I thought we would do, there's a couple that we can respond to now, and there's a couple we would follow up with information we can spend into the record. First of all, there was a question about implants, and they are removed before any that can be removed are removed before cremation. Bob, what were the types of implants that you do remove?
We cannot cremate a deceased that has a pacemaker. It has to be removed. Silicone implants, you have to obtain permission. There's different regulations on that. I'm not completely aware of all of those at this time. But if we're currently, the crematory we use in Virginia does not require that. But every state is different. So if it's a requirement, then by the state, then they would be removed. A lot of medical implants like titanium shafts, hip replacements, knee replacements, all of that metal is still there when the cremation is done and is disposed of as medical waste. It is not, the titanium rod is not completely melted down, and it is, the rod is still there, and that is disposed of as medical waste in another format outside of the crematory.
The question about, and I'm going a little bit maybe in a different order just because it's how I had kind of organized my notes. But the garage, the existing residential garage will be used as I think stated in the testimony. It will be used for bodies that will be either being viewed in the crematory in the house or using the crematory, or the crematory is being used for. So the garage will be used and maintained that way. It was actually one of the features of the conversion that made sense for Bob to do it this way. There was a question, basically most, if not all of the toxic materials that were mentioned that I heard in testimony are part of what are tested. I can't tell you I caught them all, but basically what is tested by the state for permitting purposes is anything that gets emitted from the cremation process. Basically anything that gets emitted from the burning of anything in a commercial facility is tested similarly. And so this is tested that way, just like any other commercial facility that burns materials would be tested. And so it's the laundry list. And if again, I can't tell you I heard all of them, but I certainly, most of the ones that were mentioned, I heard. Carbon monoxide is tested. Nitrogen dioxide is tested. I don't know if carbon dioxide is tested or has to be tested, but if it's an EPA if it's a material regulated by the EPA in terms of emissions from incineration, from the burning process of any commercial operation, then it would be tested. And this is information that we'll provide as part of our follow-up information put into the record, and we'll include, what to the best we can, a website that people can access if there is one, which I believe there is from the MDE, which is readily available, so we can provide that information. As was mentioned, there's no change in zone requested. That's something I think Jasmine mentioned as well. Bob mentioned that to the extent there are materials that are not combusted, there's a medical waste disposal procedure for that. Just a correction: this would not be the largest single point source of emissions in the city by any stretch of the imagination. That was mentioned. And I think that generally covers, just my initial response. But again, especially when it comes to the MD permitting process, I can enter all that information into the record, and it can be accessed by anyone reviewing the record. If I missed any questions, or if there's anything else you'd like me to answer, or the applicant's team to answer, please feel free. I can't tell you it's comprehensive in my responses, but I'm happy if there was anything else at this time, or if there is information in addition to what I've already taken down that you'd like us to be submitting into the record.
Got it. I want to open it up one more time for council members if there's any final questions. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Scott. Can you give us an idea of the number of cremations that would happen each day? Would that happen 7 days a week, or would that happen just how often would that happen? Yes.
Yeah, let me answer first, and then Bob can talk a little bit more. But right now, the projections, and it's difficult for Bob to project exactly, but I think that once this aspect of the service they provide gets established, because obviously it won't be immediate, but if it's in the range of 150 or so for a year, I think that's where Bob thinks it might end up being. Once again, it gets established as something that they're offering, but I don't know that that's a number that is anything more than his ability to project kind of based what he thinks the needs are, what he's seen, and what he can't provide now, and what he thinks it might grow into over time. Bob, do you want to talk about how many days a week you would be doing this?
I think the maximum that cremations that they recommend is either 2 or 3 a day. If we're doing 150, I don't anticipate it being that many. I don't anticipate it being 7 days a week. Michael, I will tell you this, and I think somebody brought it up. We are not looking or have no thoughts of doing outside cremations. This would be cremations for Duval Funeral Home only. Someone else asked the question about why don't we go to other crematories. Most other funeral homes are the same way. They don't do other funeral homes cremations. There are a few third parties, but I can't just call a funeral home up and say, I want to bring a cremation to you.
So is that why you don't use the Pumphrey facility?
I was about to say.
Pumphrey's only does their cremations. I'm guessing they probably do. I can't, I'd say there are 400 or 500 cremations they do, but they do they only do theirs.
And it's just a point on the MDE testing. When they look at this for issuance of a permit, they will assume a worst case scenario where the crematorium facility is operating almost continuously. And then the levels of emissions are based on that operation. So not quite the question you were answering, but just to talk a little bit more about the MDE procedures for permitting.
You can't run the machine continuously anyway. It will destroy the machine. You have to have downtime on it. You cannot run 24/7. It won't work.
And does the cremation process include the casket and all the material inside the casket, or is the body removed from the casket and cremated?
No, They are, if a casket is purchased, we have cremation caskets, but the deceased is in that container. Not everyone uses a casket though.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
But nothing is, there, in the cremation process, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
You can only place combustible items in with the deceased, clothing, something like that. Some cultures, they want certain things to go with them, but you cannot put something that is not combustible. Plastics you're not supposed to put in there, things like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question for our staff. How many, I guess, areas of our community are abutting industrial commercial zones with residential zones? I know you said that this particular location is already in a commercial zone, but it's 50 feet away from a residential zone. So how many other, I guess, developments are in our city that are that close with that sort of setup, with a commercial zone directly near the residential zone? I don't know if you can answer that this evening, but.
No, I have to look that up for you, but the majority of the whole Frederick Avenue corridor is all CD, and most of the time there's adjacent to residential neighborhoods, but I can confirm that for you.
But that's quite different than a industrial zone located next to residential, right? There's only a few areas, I3,
So you're asking about industrial zones adjacent to residential? Is that what? Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Well, I think that was part of Lorianne's question, but that's my question now too, since Lorianne asked that.
All right, so Jasmine, you'll get back to them with that answer.
I will get back.
Thank you. Any other questions, guys? Otherwise, we have a recommendation to hold a record open until 5 p.m. September 2nd, 2020. Neil, you got a question?
Well, I would like to just say a couple of things, if I may.
Okay.
So, first of all, the concept that we're choosing to put things in different places, I just need to defend us a little bit, and I try not to be defensive, but the applicant for any project comes before us and brings a proposal and has a location and a use picked out, and then we go through a process like this. They worked with the planning staff for the last however many 6 months or so. It came to a public hearing. Did we do the best job of communicating information? I've been lobbying for us to do better for many, many years, and I hope that we will improve greatly as we go forward. But this is the process. This is the first hearing. This is not a deciding event. This is beginning to open a public record. So for those of you who feel that this sort of thing happens to your neighborhood and not others, that's what every neighborhood thinks. I live in Kentlands. There are 2 gas stations here. One is the 7-Eleven. One of them is adjacent to an apartment building and across the street from a condominium building. So I mean, these sorts of things are all over the city. And in terms of Lorianne's question, I was actually earlier in the meeting looking at a zoning map of the city, and the city is a big mixture of commercial, residential, and industrial areas. In fact, we have very few areas that are strictly zoned as industrial. And you have the 355 corridor, you have other major thoroughfares like Samag Highway that are primarily commercial in nature and have residential areas abutting them. So it's a tough situation for us to adjudicate, because no matter what you do, if there's something of a commercial nature, it's almost certainly going to be very close to somebody's home. So I just wanted to make that clear, that this is not something that is aimed at Deer Park. This is something where the Duvall family owns a property and is looking to make more use of it, and it's coming before us for the very first time. and we're all listening and trying to understand what the implications are and what makes sense.
I'll just underscore one part of that, and that is if somebody files an application like this, it has to come before us. It's not as if number one, as Neil suggests, we didn't originate this application. Not that we're saying it's, we're not opining on this thing yet, but the process is what it is. It's not, if somebody puts in an application like this, it comes to public hearing and we consider it. And everybody from the public gets a chance to speak on it. And then we open the record and we'll consider the record, and ultimately the council will take a vote.
All right, I'd like to say one more thing, sorry. Just on a side note, and I don't want to offend the people that raised their hand and spoke, but in particular, Ghislaine, your testimony was very well crafted and very well presented. And I just wanted to, if I was wearing a hat, I would tip my hat to you. I thought it was one of the better testimonies I've heard as a member of the council.
All right. So with that, staff recommends that the mayor and council hold our record open until 5 p.m. September 2nd, 2020, with anticipated policy discussion and final action on September 21st, 2020. What's the pleasure of the council? Neil?
So moved.
Lorianne?
Second.
Okay, I'm going to call the roll. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. To keeping the record open, Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma?
Aye.
Councilmember Sales?
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel?
Aye.
Councilmember Wu?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. We thank the applicant. Thank everybody who testified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda is from the mayor and council. We're going to start with Councilmember Spiegel.
All right, the hour's getting late, so I'll keep it pretty brief. First, I have a formal announcement after a closed executive session. A closed meeting was held virtually by the mayor and city council on Monday, July 27th, 2020 at approximately 10:03 p.m. pursuant to a motion adopted unanimously. The meeting was proposed to be closed pursuant to the general provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, sections 3-305B1I, regarding the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction, and 3-305B8 to consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation. The topics discussed were a personnel matter to conduct the city attorney's annual review and also pending litigation. Present at the meeting were Mayor Ashman, council members Harris, Sales, Sesma, Spiegel, and Wu. And staff present were Acting City Manager Enslinger, City Attorney Board, Deputy City Attorney Johnson, and Assistant City Manager Lonigan. And all staff left at 10:16 p.m. Upon conclusion of the discussion, the closed meeting was adjourned at approximately 11:01 p.m. And then just one quick mention, shout out to our community services team and all the folks involved in our Extreme Finances Challenge, including a number of awesome middle schoolers who participated in this financial literacy program over the course of several months. And of course, the last few months of the program had to be virtual, but this was a program that was funded by partners, nonprofit partners, and other supporters of our financial literacy programs in the city, and our community services division, and particularly Tawana Lofton did an awesome job organizing this program for our middle schoolers, teaching them all about financial education, credit, how to access banking services, how to do a family budget. So many skills that are important all the time, but particularly important in a time of crisis with economics and with jobs. So I just want to tip my hat again to everybody who was involved in that program. I was able to participate in the virtual graduation ceremony and celebration about a week or so ago. And it was great to see all these kids who participated and completed the program. And as part of the incentive, they get a few $100s from our sponsors to be able to deposit into their new savings accounts where they can use their new financial literacy skills to grow that money. So thanks again to everybody involved in that. That's all I got tonight.
Thank you, Ryan. We will go to Councilmember Sesma.
Thank you. Don't have much tonight. I just basically I wanted to remind people that the census isn't over yet. Apparently the White House wants to end it early, but I want to remind people that if you haven't responded yet to the 2020 census, there's still an opportunity to do so. I think Gaithersburg has been doing well in response to the census, better than probably as well as anybody in Montgomery County, and that's good. Just remind you that everyone counts, and so stand up and be counted. This is your opportunity. It's important for all municipalities to have an accurate count of the number of people, not citizens, the number of people living within our corporate boundaries. So that's very important. Today I participated in a call with the National League of Cities that gave us a summary of some negotiations that are happening in the Senate and in Congress on relief bills that are being negotiated. Some of you may have heard that at this point, state and local governments have, basically local governments have been excluded from all of the relief packages that have been passed so far. I think one of the important things to know is that over 1.4 million state and local government employees have been laid off as part of because of stresses from the pandemic. So today we heard from Senator Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, who's working with Senator Menendez, a Democrat from New Jersey, on supporting a bill to support and relieve some of the stresses in response to the way cities have been able to respond or haven't been able to respond to local governments. If this money isn't provided, then the impact of those things in terms of lost revenue to cities and towns and villages and counties is probably not just a loss of employees, but a loss of services to the taxpayer. So this is very important. So if you haven't sent a letter to your representatives in Congress or in the Senate, please do so. I think we have the advantage of living in a state where we have strong support for local government in Congress. So, but it never hurts to let that be known. So that's really all I have. I think the last announcement is the Kentlands Lakelands 5K, which is normally held on Labor Day weekend, will now be a virtual run or virtual race. So you can find out about that by going to the Kentlands Community Foundation website. We'll share that through social media, but it's a good way to compete with yourself and make sure that you can, even during the stay-at-home orders and the shutdown and the lack of and the telework, which has reduced our regular exercise, it's still important to see if you can get out there and do that for yourself, and also participate in the fundraiser that the virtual race is going to be. So that's about it today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mayor. So not many updates this evening. I just want to encourage everyone who is eligible to vote to please apply for a mail-in ballot. We don't know what the future may hold, but it's better to plan in advance to vote from home than it is to go to the polls. And so I'm just encouraging everyone to vote. And as my colleague mentioned, the census is still being taken. So if you haven't filled it out, don't wait for someone to knock on your door. Take advantage and make sure you get counted soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it brief as well because we still have more to do, but I wanted to talk about transportation and two things that I participated in. One, I want to thank Ryan Miner, who runs the Miner Detail podcast, for inviting me to join a discussion about the Governor's Highway Widening Project, along with Marilyn Balcom from the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce, Emmett Tidings from the Suburban Maryland Transportation Alliance, and Senator Nancy King, who represents District 39, our neighbors to the east and north, Montgomery Village, Germantown, and so forth. We had a really good discussion. I thought it went on for about an hour. I think the public reaction has been pretty positive, so I'd encourage anyone who's interested in finding out how this project is designed and what impact it will have on transportation and traffic to check out the podcast. Also concerning transportation, I attended the monthly meeting of the Regional Transportation Planning Board, where several things were discussed, including passing an equity resolution to make sure that all major transportation projects examine the equity and establish that as a fundamental value for the organization. There was also a briefing and recommendation made on a highway safety program for the region based on presentations that had been made at the 3 previous meetings, where Virginia, Washington, D.C., and the state of Maryland presented their findings from a long study of causes for accidents and fatalities on our highways and ways to improve. I thought the whole process was quite informative. It was great to see that much research being done and a lot of steps being taken in order to make us safer on the roads. And finally, the Transit Access Focus Areas study, which is basically focused on ways to get people to major transit hubs more easily, particularly walkable, bikeable, as well as drivable. And there are 49 transportation access focus areas throughout the region. One of them in Gaithersburg is going to be the transit center at Lake Forest Mall. And the Transportation Planning Board will be conducting a study of ways to improve connections at all 49 areas, and we're hoping that it makes it easier for people to use other forms of transportation. Be safe out there. The pandemic is still raging and we don't want anybody to get sick, so be careful. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councilmember Wu.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Right. I will note next week we will have a work session to discuss the next steps for options for Lake Forest Mall. Again, this meeting will be done by Zoom. And you can go to, if you'd like to sign up to be part of the Zoom to testify, you can go to gaithersburgmd.gov/virtual. The next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, August 17th. And with that, we will go to, from the Acting City Manager, Dennis Enslinger.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The only item I wanted to talk about tonight is really the upcoming rain event that we're going to have. Public Works has done a really good job of going and looking at all the facilities that we have in terms of storm drains and also the high hazard dams. But if residents do see localized flooding, they can report that to the Public Works Department at publicworks@gaithersburgmd.gov. And hopefully everything will work out good and the storm will go a little bit further out to the sea. So.
Thank you, Dennis. Now, I know Tom Lonergan is out of town. Are you giving any sort of update on his behalf?
Yeah, I just have a quick item for Tom also. He just wanted to remind everybody that the Reopen Montgomery grant program is now accepting applications. Again, that is a program where businesses can seek reimbursement of expenses incurred to comply with state or county regulations regarding reopening. Those grants are up to $5,000. Probably the quickest way to find that resource would be to just go on the internet or the county's website and type in Reopen Montgomery Grant Program.
Thank you, Dennis. Next, we'll move on to consolidated policy discussions, and Lynn Ward is going to lead us in that as we talk about our elections ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to talk about the proposed charter change first, which is section 29A of the charter that deals with write-in candidates. Certainly, these items were introduced back in June, on June 1st. We did have a public hearing on July 6th, and the record was held open until July 20th. So this item is before you this evening for a final action. The amendment to section 29A does clarify that write-in candidates are not available or not permissible in city elections. So we'll deal with that one first, and then we'll move to the code changes.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. So this is policy discussion. I obviously am not voting here, but I am supportive of the recommendation from the Board of Supervisors of Elections. I think they made a compelling case, and we saw in practice at least some of the inherent complications with it. So who would like to go first from the council? Okay, I'm gonna pick Mike Sesmo. We'll start with Mike. We'll go to Rob, Lorianne, Neil, and Ryan.
All right. You know, we've talked about this. I think we provided the opportunity in a couple of elections. I think we also lowered the bar in terms of someone who wants to qualify to run for an open seat or for the mayor position. It's 100 signatures. You have a good period of time to obtain those signatures from registered voters within the city. And then there's campaign finance reporting and some training. I think we heard a lot of voices tonight. I expect that some of them may consider running. I wouldn't wait to become a write-in candidate. You can take it from everybody who's on the dais that if you want to run, and some of you have the smarts to do it, the dedication and the commitment, then put your ideas together, start talking to people, organize a campaign, and submit your candidate petition. You have plenty of time to do it once those petitions are available. So I don't believe that there's an advantage of having a write-in candidate. Certainly, there are opportunities where dissent is important, but I'm not sure that the write-in candidate is the best way to address those particular issues. So I will support the resolution to remove the opportunity for write-in candidates in general or special elections.
Okay, Rob.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think as I discussed throughout the entire process, I'm on the fence about the presence of write-in candidates within our charter. I don't want to say I'm agnostic, but I could go either way there. And so the recommendation of the body that we put in place to advise us and to regulate the elections carries heavy sway with me. Now, what I have been talking about for all this time is this notion of any barriers to entry to run for candidacy. And I think I disagree to some extent, not to any great extent with my colleagues, that the mechanisms that we currently have in place are sufficiently low barriers for everyone to enter. I mean, it is a barrier to entry. My view is that it should be as low as possible. I had been advocating for the presence of some kind of checking mechanism within our rules where where any prospective candidate could submit their signatures to be checked officially by BOS and to have a curing period. And I understand that did not carry much weight, but I'm confident that those that run the election, including their city attorney, who I'm looking at her picture now, can ensure that the process is as robust as they already ensure it is, because I've gone through the process twice already, that the process can address these issues more robustly to make sure that those that come forward to be prospective candidates and are provided the assistance that the city attorney and her staff do in managing the elections, can overcome that hurdle that I'm concerned about. So I'll support this resolution or this charter amendment.
Thank you, Rob. We'll go to Lorianne, then Neil, then Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to this amendment and eliminating the ability for write-in candidates to play a role in our elections moving forward, I'm a bit on the fence. As my colleague mentioned, I don't want anyone to think that what we're proposing or what's being proposed is going to limit anyone's ability to participate in the process of selecting the next member of the city council or any other body that allows write-in candidates. As our staff and the Board of Elections has mentioned, this did pose quite a challenge with regards to finalizing the election results, to figuring out how best to share information about a write-in candidate with the community. I've run for office twice. I know how difficult it is to collect signatures, to reach out to residents. And so I don't want anyone to necessarily focus on circumventing the process, but rather using the process to have your voice heard. And so processes are definitely in place. We don't always like them, but it's definitely a manageable feat if you're interested in taking on this role. And so, yeah, I'll listen to what my colleagues have to say and still trying to process this decision. So.
Okay, thanks, Lorianne. We'll go to Neil.
Thank you, one and all. So, as has been said, the barrier for getting on the ballot is relatively low here. You need 100 signatures, which can be gathered at many public gatherings, presuming there's not a pandemic going on, but the Gaithersburg Book Festival and Summerfest and others are within the window of time when you'd want to gather signatures. And I also think the goal of the process is to get elected. And if you want to get elected, you want to be on the ballot. You don't want to be a write-in. We had a group of people who were supporting write-ins, and they still managed to get no more than 15% of the vote. And not getting on the ballot is a real barrier because you don't get into the campaign, the city's election guide. You don't get your videos on the website. And I think the Board of Supervisors of Election made it very clear that it makes a tremendous amount of extra work for a group that is already doing a lot of work on the city's behalf. So, just to clean it up and make sure that people who are serious about becoming members of the elected officials of the city of Gaithersburg, I support losing the write-ins and making sure that people actually get themselves on the ballot. So I do support this.
Thank you, Neil. Ryan.
Well, I do think we ought to remind everyone again that this is not a proposal that the council came up with, but rather was brought to us by our independent Board of Supervisors of Elections. And it was their unanimous recommendation. We did not ask for this to come before us. And in fact, a number of us actually voted in favor of authorizing write-in candidates a number of years ago. So, I just want to make that clear for folks who are concerned that this is some sort of political attempt to change the system. It's really, it's gone through sort of the regular process of our Board of Supervisors of Elections making their own recommendations to us for our consideration. I'm a little queasy about foreclosing the door entirely to any form of write-in candidacy. I do understand the arguments that, you know, at least some form of write-in candidacy, even with a number of restrictions, you know, at least in many places is considered to be an opportunity to open the door to ensure that there is robust competition in elections and to ensure that people who otherwise might feel like there are barriers that are too high to entry for regular candidacy to engage the process, or if there are late breaking and last minute developments during election cycles that are important for the public debate. But I also understand very strong arguments on the other side that have already been articulated tonight and multiple times at our previous public meetings on this. I have said previously that I would be comfortable keeping some form of write-in candidacy as long as we imposed other rules that made it very clear that write-in candidates cannot take advantage of the same normal benefits of a regular candidacy, that they shouldn't have their names listed on the city website, that there shouldn't be press releases that go out with their names on them, that there shouldn't be placards at the polling stations notifying voters of the names of the write-in candidates, because that's the very point of a write-in candidate, to be distinguished from a regular candidate. And when you blur the lines too much and give a write-in candidate too much of the flavor of a regular candidate, it sort of penalizes those who go through the normal process to become regular candidates. But having said all that, I still feel a little queasy about the idea of completely removing all prospects of any form or sort of write-in candidacy. So I share the comments of a couple of my other colleagues who are sort of, you know, understand both sides of this argument, but at the same time, we do have strong recommendations from our Board of Supervisors of Elections. We do have very reasonable basis for those recommendations, strong arguments, and I think a very good process right now to ensure that our barriers are not too high for regular candidacy. And we can continue to explore in the future other ways to encourage and allow people to participate in the process as candidates as well, without necessarily allowing write-in candidates. But again, as somebody who voted for the creation of write-in candidates many years ago, I do feel a little uncomfortable about this decision.
Okay, would someone like
to... That was a unanimous vote.
Well,
years ago.
I'd like to get us to a vote. Would someone like to?
No, I'm just addressing. We all voted for that, Ryan.
So when you all voted for that, what was the, I guess, impetus behind approving or voting for write-in candidates?
It was a low turnout election in 2013. Was it 2013? There was a very low turnout election because there was an uncontested race. And we were toying with ways to increase participation and involvement in elections. And this came up as one of the suggested, you know, items on the menu that we could consider, and got added to the menu of things that we adopted in 2013 after that uncontested election with very low turnout. But it's kind of interesting when you think about, you know, all right, that doesn't necessarily demonstrate that had there been the opportunity for write-in candidates in 2013, that someone would have taken advantage of it, or that, you know, if somebody had really wanted to run against the candidates in 2013, that they couldn't have done it as a regular candidate. But somehow it sort of got into the mix of our discussion, and we said we're going to give this a try to see if it will help spur involvement in our campaign process and encourage more people to get involved. And if there's ever a future situation where somebody was running unopposed, it would allow someone to step in later in the game. And that's actually what happened in 2019.
Thank you, Ryan. I think Neil has a comment.
Oh, I'd like to know if it's time to remove the resolution.
Yes, it is.
I would like to move the resolution of the Mayor and City Council of Gaithersburg, Maryland, to amend the section 29A of the City Charter entitled Write-In Candidates.
Mike.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to call the roll. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Up the drama here. Aye.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Lynn, what's the next one?
The next are a series of, it's an ordinance amending 5 different sections of Chapter 6C, which is our election section of the city code. The first change would be to Section 6C-305, which would be consistent with the vote that you just took. It does delete the section of the code that allows for writing candidates. The changes to sections 6C5, 7, and 9 are similar. These deal with campaign finance reports, and it amends the date, the dates between the last transaction for campaign report and when the report is due, so that there would be a 3-day period in between those 2 dates. And then the last section is section 6C22, which deals with absentee ballots. And it would amend the due date for absentee ballots to be by the close of polls on election day. Again, these were introduced on June 6th. We have public hearing on July 6th, and the public record was kept open until July 20th. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Neil.
Is this one motion or a bunch of motions?
This would be just one motion.
I would like to move that we pass the ordinance to amend Chapter 6C of the City Code entitled Elections.
Okay.
Oh, can I guess.
Go ahead, Mike, please.
I would second it, but I want to amend it because I don't favor, given what's going on with the Postal Service and the controversy of mail-in ballots and the possibility that ballots won't be counted, not because they weren't submitted in they weren't postmarked, because they wouldn't have been received within that period of time. So I didn't think that was a big problem. I think the current language is the ballot must be postmarked before the close of the on the day of the election, but could be received 2 calendar days after the election and be counted. This would change it that it must be received on election day to be counted. So I opposed that. I wasn't in favor of that at that time. So that would be my amendment, to leave that that Article 3(6)(c)(22) the same as it was, as it currently is. And with that, I'll second it with that amendment.
Lynn, what's the process? Well, do we need to hear the amendment, or because Neil didn't move it that way? So what do you?
Right. So Neil would have to accept that amendment for the motion to go forward. Otherwise, we would need a new motion.
Yeah, sorry.
Then I'll withdraw my second.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second to what's proposed before us?
Second.
And please go. Okay. Okay.
So
Mike, go ahead.
I propose an amendment to the.
Someone would have to second his amendment, and we'd vote on that next.
Let's hear the amendment out first.
So the amendment is to retain the current language that a properly postmarked ballot can be received up to 2 days following the election, 2 business days following the election. I think that's what the language is, right?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
The ballot must be received on or before the close of, on or before.
Must be postmarked on or before election day and received within 2 days after the election.
Right. I think
is the current language. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So Lynn, just so I get the process right here, I'm assuming Rob is about the second. We have a motion and a second. It's on the table. Do we need to take the vote on that before we hear this other motion?
No, you would deal with the motion to amend first. If there is a second to that and a majority supports the motion to amend, then the main motion would be amended.
All right. If it wasn't like 11 at night, I would probably know all that. Okay, Rob, do you want to second Mike's motion to amend?
The short version of that is yes. The longer version of that is, I probably would have been fine voting in favor of the proposed.
But you prefer to complicate things.
Well, no. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about this, about voter enfranchisement. I think actually Mike and I were the most vocal on the dais about that issue at the time. So, it obviously at that time was my preference. I was willing to, for lack of a better term, go with the flow. But since Mike has raised the issue, I'm going to second it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to call the roll. For the record, if I was voting on this, I would vote against the amendment. But I would vote for the original proposed ordinance changes. Okay. So all those in favor of the amendment that Mike has proposed, say aye or nay. We'll go through the roll. Councilmember Harris.
Nay.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Was that, I didn't catch that. Was that aye or nay?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay. The amendment carries. Now we'll call the roll on the original motion on the ordinance as amended. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay, then that motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
as long as we're talking about election laws, I would like to suggest strongly that the city move forward with planning for vote by mail. And I think the world has changed and we've learned that it works. So we should understand what the costs are, what the procedure would be, and what it would take. But I think that's the wave of the future at this point. So we should start that process.
Something?
Yeah, I was going to say, if I can address that quickly, the Board of Supervisors of Elections is already working on that. We did receive, the State Board of Elections just put out, I shouldn't say just, last month put out a report regarding the primary, which is a vote by mail process. So the board has received that report and is reviewing that. Staff is also meeting later this week to kind of strategize or brainstorm on some method of public engagement. We want to either do a survey or a forum or some type of public engagement to get the public's feel for vote by mail. But the board does realize and recognize that if we are going to change this process, they need to make this decision pretty quickly because it will take a while to get everything implemented. So that is an issue. I mean, I've had emails with the BOSC today on that issue as well. So it is something that they are looking at and should be making a recommendation to you all in the relatively near future.
I had a quick question, Lynn. You've also looked at the report from the city of Rockville.
Yes, we have that as well. Yep.
Okay. Thank you guys. Lynn, next is from the city attorney.
I don't have anything further this evening.
Okay. Well, then I will remind everyone to week for our work session regarding options for the future of Lake Forest Mall, and remind everyone as well that the next regular meeting of Mayor and City Council is on Monday, August 17th. Until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.